OverDrive with Hayes, Noodles, and the O-Dog on TSN 1050.
All right. Hello, Canada, and welcome into OverDrive on this beautiful Wednesday afternoon. We are live on TSN2, TSN 1050, and on TSN's YouTube channel. I'm Aaron Karolnik in for Hayes. Dave Feschuk has to fill the shoes of both the O-Dog and Jamie Noodles McLennan for the next 3 hours. And Dave, we need a massive show today. We do, because walking around the hallways here at TSN before we began today, and a very high-ranking TSN executive came up to me, asked me, what are you doing here? Usually you're hosting in the mornings. Today you're doing OverDrive. And I told him what was going on, and he said, sounds more like underdrive to me. And that was very insulting. So what we're going to do, Dave, is put forth a fantastic product for the next 3 hours.
Hey, man, I get heckled pulling out of my driveway in my neighborhood. All the OverDrive fans are like, oh, no, you?
Don't leave.
Oh, yeah.
Don't leave the driveway, Feschuk. Stay at home.
Seriously.
Yeah,
we don't want it. We don't want to see it. We don't want to hear it. But, hey, we heard the tragically hip on the roll in there from JP in honor of the great Bob McKenzie. A momentous day in sports media yesterday when the Bob father announced his retirement.
Momentous indeed, no doubt, and a true legend. I mean, we both worked here for a long time and worked with McKenzie a long time, and he'll be missed. He'll be missed, but, I mean, his contributions to the brand will last forever, of course, and he'll still be around. I know, you say you retire, but, McKenzie might have a scoop once, and he's like, you know what, let's throw this out there on Twitter and bring it up. But on the subject of big performances, I don't think it would be possible to consider anyone else than George Springer yesterday with his 2-home run and 7 RBI performance for the Toronto Blue Jays, who saw this coming? Like, this team is on fire. They destroy the Yankees again yesterday, 12-5. Springer is the catalyst. And just consider all the guys that are out right now. Bichette didn't play. Santander didn't play. Dalton Varsho didn't play. Vlad and Kirk were 0 for 9 combined.
Yeah.
And Springer has 7 RBIs, a career high, and he looks rejuvenated. They're just smashing Yankee pitching. I couldn't believe what they were able to do. And an opportunity tonight down at the Dome, Mr. Feschuk, to tie for the top spot in the American League for the Toronto Blue Jays and go to 10 games over 500. Who saw this coming? Like, name a single person. There's no way anyone could have possibly foreseen this, especially considering all the injuries that they've had so far this year.
I bet Ross Atkins and Mark Shapiro say they knew it was coming all along.
Internal development.
Internal improvement, internal development. They've been waiting for it, and here it is, right? But you're right. Like, these guys out of the gate this year looked like they had an offense that was sputtering. George Springer looked like his career was over at times.
It did last year, for sure.
Last year and early this year, he did not look like anything close to a former World Series MVP with real pop in his bat at this point in his career. Yeah, this is an incredibly unexpected but great surprise for the Blue Jays fans in this town. And
so much fun.
The beautiful thing is, AK, and we said it as the season began, is that the American League's not very good. Like, there is no superpower in the American League. The Yankees are a good team, not a great team. They're carried by Aaron Judge in a very uncomfortable way. Like, there's a lot on Aaron Judge's back, and it's a broad back and a strong back, but that's a lot to carry for one guy. And you kind of look at it, and it's wide open. So the idea that you're now in July 2nd, you've got a chance to get a share of first place in the American League East. Everything's possible, man. Like, the trade deadline's coming. There's opportunity in the wind, and the idea that these guys haven't had playoff success, well, this is the year where anybody that hasn't has a chance.
And I guess the idea coming into the season was, you have all these new pieces to augment the roster. You have Jimenez, who has had a couple big hits the last couple of days, for sure, but overall has been underwhelming and injured. Santander has been a literal zero. Yeah. Max Scherzer has thrown 7 innings for you, and you're still where you are. And like, what if they got a healthy Santander back, which not sure how likely that is, but the man hit 44 bombs last year for Baltimore.
Yeah.
You plug him into the middle of the lineup, and you have Kirk doing what he's doing, Springer doing what he's doing, a healthy Bichette, Guerrero, amongst others. Varsho, of course, could come back in the not-too-distant future as well. There's a lot of reasons to be optimistic about this team. Now, like any team, they have holes, right? I mean, they could use another arm. as far as their late inning relievers go, they could probably use another front of the rotation starter. I mean, I don't think anyone's counting on Scherzer. Eric Lauer has been an incredible story, but let's call it what it is. He's probably like a fringe rotation guy, even though he's been great. Got to give him a ton of credit for his performance so far. You don't want to go into a postseason game with Eric Lauer on the hill, ideally. But you've got three really good pitchers, three really good starting pitchers. You could find a way to pick up a fourth, and guys like Merrill Kelly and Zach Gallen and, I don't know, maybe Jacob deGrom could be available by trade. And the Jays have not shown an aversion to spending money. They're one of the highest payrolls in baseball. They just gave Vlad Jr. $500 million. The American League, like as far as where the Jays stand at the moment, are they as good as the Yankees, the Astros, the Tigers, the Rays? Yeah. I mean, as they're rolling right now, and maybe some of the other guys who could be coming, it's a very exciting time to be a Blue Jays fan.
Well, look, I mean, you want to pump the brakes a little bit, because I think you made an interesting point there. Like, they need help still.
They do.
Like,
everybody does.
You've got to, the idea that Lauer, he's overachieving right now, and it would be nice if he continues to overachieve, but to expect him to overachieve, to rely on him to overachieve would be kind of naive, I think. Because look at it, like, yeah, they're one game back and have a chance to pull even with the Yankees tonight. But if you look at sort of like that important column, run differential, the Yankees are a plus 105. The Blue Jays are a plus 4.
Yeah, and they were minus 70 or so at one point of the year. They were in a deep hole.
They're climbing out of a hole, right? They're climbing out of a hole with a hot streak. But as we all know, what gets hot gets cold. What goes up comes down. Where is their middle? Where is their sort of, even keel? It's probably a little below what it is right now, right? They're absolutely on fire. So they're going to need help. But the beauty of it is, AK, I mean, they're early in the season, a month and two into the season, there were real questions. Would they be buyers or would they be sellers?
Yeah.
Would they just be bidding it due to Bo Bichette because who's in a contract year and saying, let's get something for him before we lose him to free agency? There's no way they're sellers now, right? That's the beauty of it.
They should be buyers because of the quality or lack thereof in the American League. And do I think Toronto's the greatest team ever assembled? Do I think they're as good as the 2015 or 2016 Blue Jays? I don't. But I also think the American League has come to a point where who knows?
Yeah, nobody
knows? Like, nobody is crazy good. And the Yankees have lost. Of course, you lose Garrett Cole when the season starts. That's a massive hit to a team like the New York Yankees. And they will, I'm certain, be looking to make some moves ahead of the July 31st trade deadline, just like any of the contenders have been. But, I mean, Boston, a lot of people expected that they'd be one of the best teams in the American League. They've been terrible. Baltimore has been an abomination. So for the Blue Jays, and I don't know what that looks like, and it's not like they have this incredible farm system to rely upon when it comes to trades, but they have money to spend and a need, and I would say a number of needs as far as what they could look to accomplish ahead of the trade deadline to augment a roster that is already pretty damn good and make it even better. And who knows, maybe they win the first playoff game in the Atkins-Shapiro era.
Wouldn't that be something? Let's start there.
Win a playoff game, and you go from there. But, I mean, as far as their chances, I looked at Fangraphs this morning. They're over 65% chance to make the playoffs as a wild card team at least. So that goes a long way at this point in time.
Yeah, and it goes a long way just, in terms of a sports town that's down right now, right?
Very down.
When you think about
very down.
Masai Ujiri, that era ending, and the Raptors being where they are, and the Shanaplan era ending, and the Leafs, trying to figure it out again with, maybe some new DNA, whatever that means, and Mitch Marner in Vegas. And, people in this town need something to lean on here, and they need something to be excited about. And this is a team that you can get excited about. Like yesterday, I think, to have a Canada Day crowd there, a 3 p.m. game, and to do what they did, right? Like, that was the hottest.
Electric.
That was the hottest ticket of the year.
Oh, yeah. Expensive tickets. Tonight, too.
Yeah.
Tomorrow, the 4-game set. Yeah, with the Jays a chance to win it today.
And how many times
it'd be awesome.
Like, I've got a ton of people, in my email list and my text list that spend a lot of money on tickets in this town who text me a lot of venom when they invest a lot of money to go see a game and the home team doesn't show up in Toronto, right? Like, I can name a few.
Game 5, Game 7, for the Toronto Maple Leafs.
There was some high prices paid there. So when you get the hottest ticket of the Blue Jays season, and obviously it wasn't as expensive yesterday down at the Dome as it was to get into Game 5 and Game 7 down on Bay Street, but it was expensive. And But you know what? When people get what they pay for, which is a thrill ride, a trouncing of the Yankees
on Canada Day in those red jerseys, they are elated.
And in the elbows up era.
Yeah.
People, I couldn't believe the euphoria coming out of that building yesterday. It was incredible.
Well, you make a good point about the Toronto sports scene. Everyone a little down in the dumps as far as what products are being pitched here going forward. And the Raptors, I mean, we saw them make a significant financial expenditure when it comes to Jakob Poeltl yesterday, an extension worth $104 million over 4 years. So he's making close to $26 million a year is Jakob Poeltl. So he's part of that core now long-term with R.J. Barrett and Emmanuel Quickley and Brandon Ingram and Scotty Barnes. Say what you will about the team. I think they're well-positioned to be vying for a playoff spot, much like in the American League in baseball, the Eastern Conference and the NBA, very much up in the air. And then with regards to the Toronto Maple Leafs, we know what they did or didn't do on July the 1st. We know Nicholas Waugh is a member of the Toronto Maple Leafs in the sign and trade for Mitch Marner. We know that Mateus Michelli comes over from the Mammoth, #TusksUp, coming over from Utah in exchange for a third-round pick. But, I mean, it's pretty clear. You hear Tree Living yesterday doing his media. You hear Tree Living on this radio show. They are very much in the market for another top six forward. They need to be, because that's the clear missing ingredient when it comes to what you're looking at this roster. They have money to spend. The question is, this is the million-dollar question that everybody around the NHL is trying to figure out, who is the player they're trying to pursue, and will they be able to get it done with questionable collection of assets at their disposal? And people will point to Easton Cowan. Don't think the Leafs will be overly keen on trading really their only pro-ready prospect. In a perfect world, you keep him, but you might have to do something.
Yeah.
You look at the back end. Could you trade a Brandon Carlo? You could. Could you package one of your draft picks, which it's almost non-existent? In 2026, they have a third and a fifth. In 2027, they have a second and a fourth. They don't have any draft picks.
No, they have no first-rounders in the foreseeable future.
So it's for the Leafs. I mean, they wanted Brad Marchand. That's pretty obvious.
Yes.
They did not get him.
Mr. DNA.
Mr. DNA. I think it would have been the perfect fit, and say what you will about what that contract would have looked like and does look like for the Panthers. A 6-year deal for a 37-year-old. Good luck, Florida, in 2030, but they'll worry about that once they have had their fifth straight Stanley Cup. So I think they'll be just okay. But for the Leafs, they're going to be looking at the trade market. That's become blatantly clear. The name Nazem Kadri has emerged recently. I don't know if it has to do with his Navigator Cup victory with the O-Dog against Duthie and Brendan Gallagher yesterday.
Well, that's actually part of it.
That's actually a spoiler. I apologize if you haven't seen it on TSN's YouTube channel. Very good content. Oh, yeah. I enjoyed it. Naz, good golfer. Good golfer. And he put that on full display, and a hell of a hockey player as well. I guess the question is, if Calgary was willing to trade Kadri to the Leafs, and we know Tree Living loves Kadri, right? We know they tried to trade for him years ago. Yep. He nixed the deal to Calgary. And then we know he signed Kadri to the current deal he's on. So Brad Tree Living, an affinity for Nazem Kadri. How do you make that deal happen?
You make it happen any way possible, because they need Nazem Kadri or someone like him. And to your point, obviously the plan was maybe Sam Bennett. Well, no, that didn't happen. Maybe Brad Marchand. No, that didn't happen. But in terms of guys that can make a difference, be the ingredient they don't have on this team, the ingredient they've missed since Nazem Kadri walked out the building. Not only 35 goals last year from Nazem Kadri at age 34, best goal-scoring season of his career, but the unpredictability, the combustibility, the living on the edge that sometimes can go on the wrong side of the edge, as we all know, in terms of the history of playoff suspensions. But the factor that makes the other team play with a head on the swivel. And they don't have anybody on this team like that, or they don't have enough guys on this team like that. Naz is the guy that had it, and they let him get away. And for Brad Tree Living, who, let Sam Bennett get away from Calgary before Sam Bennett became Sam Bennett. For Brad Tree Living, who had to trade Matthew Tkachuk out of Calgary, another DNA guy, wouldn't it be something if he could bring a guy over that every Leaf fan would love to have playing in the blue and white this summer? Yeah,
so he's got another 4 years remaining on his contract, an AAV of $7 million, which is pretty reasonable with this rising salary cap. And Kadri at age 36, 37. By the way, isn't it crazy that Nazem Kadri is, 34 years old? Where has the time gone? I think he and I are around the same age. I at Western when he was playing for the London Knights, and now I don't know. Time does fly by, but yeah, he's he's on like the 13th hole of his NHL career is Nazem Kadri when it comes to age. But it's incredible that a guy like Kadri is as sought after. Oh, it's not really incredible. It makes all the sense in the world considering I think the contract is reasonable to some extent. Although, father time does exist. Who knows what it looks like in the next couple of years? But the Leafs have a window to win now.
The clock's ticking, man.
It
you
most
heard
certainly
Keith
is.
Pelly, right? You heard Keith
did.
Pelly that winning rounds is not enough. We have to be on what was the phrasing? We have to be on a pathway to a Stanley Cup. Okay, is the CEO's vision for this team.
Yeah.
So this is not about waiting on 20-year-old Easton Cowan to become the player you hope you can become. We're past that, man. They had two prospects, Fraser Minton and Easton Cowan. They traded one last year. I'd have no problem with them trading one this year. Look, it could all end in a big thud if this group does not produce what they want it to produce, either this playoff run or maybe the next one. It could all go to but you have no other option but to double and triple and quadruple down on what you have. If you're not going to make a more creative move and really change the core in a more fundamental way, which I think a lot of people would suggest is not a bad idea and should be explored. But if you're not going to do that, let's say too many no-move clauses, too many guys that convinced they got to leave town, too complicated, can't get it done. Trading for Kadri is about as good as you can think of right now.
And he does have a no-move clause, and the belief is he'd be willing to waive it to come back to Toronto. And we know he spends a lot of time here in the summer, so we'll have to wait and see. But as far as the Leafs and where they stand in the post-Marner era, and he walks out the door, 102 points. Say what you will about his playoff performances, which were as dreadful as his other compadres in the core four. And
he had
Morgan
the most
Riley.
points out of all of them.
Well, sure. And people will, games 5, 6, and 7, Marner didn't show, which is true.
Those are important.
But I think when it comes to, I would just paint them all with a broad brush and say all of them failed in an equal fashion. Marner's the one who's gone, and John Tavares is back, but he's making $4.38 as opposed to $11 million, so it is different in that respect. And you look at some of the names that I brought up earlier, Michelli and Nicholas Waugh coming over. I think they're fine, competent players, and there's clearly a concern. All right, you're losing a lot of offense. You're losing a lot of offense with Mitch Marner walking out the door. You know how you fill some of that offense? How about if your captain is performing like a top 5 player in the world as opposed to whatever he was last year?
Yeah.
I know he was hurt. It's pretty clear. That is really a singular focus I have when it comes to next year's Maple Leafs, and I think they will go out and get somebody to augment that top 6, but if Austin Matthews is scoring 30, 35 goals for you, it doesn't matter.
No.
It doesn't matter. He needs to be one of the best players in the NHL. He's shown he's more than capable of doing that, but I just wonder about the physical limitations going forward here and the fact that his running mate for the last 7, 8 years, 9 years is gone.
Yeah.
And he'll probably play with Matthew Nyes and somebody else. Maybe it's Domi. Maybe it's Nylander. Maybe it's Michelli. Maybe it's someone who's not even on the roster. But Austin Matthews is a guy who's going to have to really step up next season and do what he's capable of doing and do what he's shown he's able to do in the past.
Without a doubt. I mean, to me, that was one of the underplayed storylines that came out of the end of season stuff was just the mismanagement, to my eye, of the Austin Matthews injury that occurred in training camp. And then for unknown reasons that really we haven't probably been given a good enough explanation about, for unknown reasons, he's hurt in training camp, carries it into game 1 of the regular season, and just continues to play inexplicably.
Matthew Tkachuk was sitting out getting healthy.
Yeah.
Well, to some extent anyways. The groin was torn off the bone and yada, yada, yada.
Well, that was a late season injury. And
LTIR. Oh, Marchand, Seth Jones. That must be nice. And clearly the Leafs could have done the same thing. And that's an issue I've always had with the Leafs who don't really try to, play with some of those loopholes that other teams around the NHL do, like Florida.
But forget the loophole. Like, if you could play with the loophole, like, it wouldn't have been insincere. It wouldn't have been, underhanded because the guy was hurt. He didn't perform like the Austin Matthews that we know. And when to your point about, if you're scoring at 30-something goal pace when your career high is nearly 70, that's a half a goal a game difference there. We talked about it a lot during last season. Like, why were the Leafs down in their offense? A lot of it you could trace to one guy, number 34, not producing it anywhere near his potential pace and his proven pace as Mr. 69. So, you know what? Let's first of all, let's hope he comes back healthy. That's priority number one. But the point is, if a few months of offseason rest get him to 100%, why didn't he take that rest in February, March, April?
Very reasonable question.
Nobody will ever know the answer.
Has answered, and again, there's no one who in the NHL who is more, I guess, just doesn't reveal their injuries. You don't know anything about what they've got going on more so than Austin Matthews, and I don't expect that to change anytime soon. So
I'll tell you what, it's not good fan relations. If you want people to have trust in you and faith in you, and by the way, pay your salary as they pour money into the coffers of your hockey club due to the fact that they're lifelong fans, I think you owe them something. And I don't think Austin Matthews is on the right track with this injury secrecy.
Yeah, that's totally fair. And transparency in sports, especially with betting coming more and more to the forefront, the fan duels and the like, becoming more and more prominent in our society. It's just, you would think it would go the other way, but in fact, the secrecy has become even more pronounced when it comes to Austin Matthews and the injuries. And we know he flew to Germany during the midst of the season, but we have not received any concrete information about what he was dealing with and what type of shape he'll come into camp with in September in 25 and 26. Our hockey insider, Chris Johnston, will join us at 6:05. CJ tweeting out that we're expecting a decision on Nick Ehlers at some point today.
Okay.
Some point today. And maybe it'll be the GM of the LA Kings, Ken Holland, who finds a way to finagle his way into signing Nick Ehlers, who actually will join us in about 10 minutes, Ken Holland. And the LA Kings were very active yesterday. They made a number of signings, including Corey Perry. So we're looking forward to catching up with Ken Holland. And another guy who was part of a big transaction was Thatcher Demko of the Vancouver Canucks, who also will join the show. Man, Doogie doing some serious work when it comes to booking guests. Demko, a 3-year extension worth $8.5 million with the Vancouver Canucks, who were very busy yesterday. They signed Besser. They signed Connor Garland. That's an impressive day for Patrick Alvin and Jim Rutherford of the Vancouver Canucks. So kudos to them. They deserve a lot of credit. We also have Keegan Matheson from MLB.com, covers the Jays. He's down at the ballpark tonight. I had a Game 3 between the Jays and the Yankees, which we'll be talking about extensively throughout the course of the afternoon. That's Dave Feschuk from the Toronto Star. I am Aaron Karolnik. This is OverDrive on TSN2, TSN 1050 live on TSN's YouTube channel.
OverDrive with Hayes, Noodles, and the O-Dog.
OverDrive continues on this Wednesday afternoon. TSN2, TSN 1050, live on TSN's YouTube channel. Korolnik Festchuk with you until 7 p.m. We have Ken Holland, the GM of the LA Kings, joining us in about 5 minutes. And I love talking to Ken Holland. He is as old school as it gets. He's won 4 Stanley Cups, has been around forever. Now with the Kings, which is kind of weird because, of course, he's synonymous with the Detroit Red Wings. Mm-hmm. Then he went to Edmonton for, I think, 4 or 5 years, and now running the show in L.A. following the departure of Rob Blake. But he's always got a lot of opinions, and I don't know if he's going to admit it to us, if he's allowed to admit it to us. We know the Kings wanted Mitch Marner.
Oh, yeah.
We know that they desperately wanted at least a sit-down with Marner, and depending on how you view how things go in the NHL, like no one has any contact with anyone before free agency officially begins, of course.
Never.
Tampering does not exist in professional sports, but I mean, they had to pivot, did the LA Kings, and they ended up spreading the money amongst a number of different guys, including Corey Perry, who's been to, 5 of the last 6 Stanley Cups. So I'm sure the LA Kings are open for some of that Perry magic when it comes to a deep playoff run.
Is it worth $3.5 million? You could say yes, you could say no. But I guess if you got the money, I mean, he brings an ingredient, right? Like he is a pest. He is kind of institutional knowledge about how to get it done in big moments. We've heard he was a presence in that Edmonton locker room in times of crisis at times. You know, he knows what to say when something needs to be said. So you pay for that stuff, and maybe you overpay for it. But, hey, the track record is what it is. You could call it coincidence that he's been on these teams, or you can call it a confluence of his influence.
Or perhaps a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B when it comes to Corey Perry. But, I mean, as far as free agency as a whole yesterday, I mean, it was very underwhelming as far as the activity and the expectations. And you would have thought, heading into free agency, all these teams have tons of cash to deploy. And some of these guys will be making crazy money relative to what we thought they'd be making. But, in fact, it was pretty muted as far as some of the contracts that were being doled out because the guys were just going back to the teams that they were on, right? Yeah. Like Brock Besser goes back to Vancouver. Who saw that coming?
That was a shocker.
Yeah, it was. And Gavrikov gets 7 by 7, leaving L.A. for the Rangers. And I think a lot of people were looking at him as maybe a $9 million player. And I suppose we'll see what Nick Ehlers is able to extract from an NHL team. But I didn't think that the rise in the salary cap contributed to some of these crazy, obscene contracts, like some people were speculating with back to, like, remember Timofey Mozgov in the NBA?
Yes.
In 2016 is making a crazy amount of money because of a massive jump in the salary cap. That didn't really happen this year in the NHL.
No, it didn't happen. I think part of it was just, look, the 2 most marketable guys, or 2 of the most marketable guys were, you know, the guys out of Florida, maybe even 3. You could
definitely
throw Ekblad. So those guys decided to take hometown discounts to stay in a zero-tax state and stay in a comfortable situation, a winning situation. So Sam Bennett could have commanded far more money on the open market if he would have decided to take himself to free agency. We all know Marchand would have been, you know, getting a hell of an offer from the Maple Leafs.
I would have loved to see what Marchand, the theoretical offers, as we are, you know, Dave, what those would have been for Marchand. Like, I wonder what Tree Living would have actually anteed up for Brad Marchand if he became a free agent.
I mean, quite a bit.
It would have been at least $32 million. That's what he got from Florida over 6 years. Now, what the Leafs would be willing to do as far as term might be a little bit different than the Florida Panthers.
Well, they got a little bit of cap space, right? So they could have probably overpaid him a little bit, maybe on a shorter term in terms of the AAV. And then you wonder, AK, like, we'll never know the answer, but what number could Mitch Marner have extracted from an NHL team if indeed he did go to market?
That's a question perhaps we'll never know. But the deal that Marner got from the Vegas Golden Knights, 8 years, $12 million on a sign and trade from the Toronto Maple Leafs. And really, we have a man on the line, Dave, who's capable of answering all the questions we just asked. However, he's probably contractually obligated not to answer them. He is the VP and general manager of the Los Angeles Kings. He's back here on TSN Radio. It is Ken Holland. Ken, what do you think about everything we just talked about with regards to free agency and some of the speculation that we have here in Toronto?
Well, I just caught you at the end there, so I didn't hear too much, but it's always an exciting time in the NHL around July 1st.
It is indeed. It was a very exciting time for you as well because, I mean, you made a number of transactions and you've been doing this gig for a long time. Can you take us through what July 1st looked like for you this time around?
Well, I come in, and obviously the team has had a real good few years here, making the playoffs, and unfortunately not being able to win a playoff round the last 4 years, losing to Edmonton. So my thought coming in here was that we needed to get a little bit bigger, a little deeper. Try to get some people in the locker room that have been on playoff runs and have a Stanley Cup pedigree. And I guess that's sign Perry and Armia up front. Armia is a really good penalty killer. Special teams are real critical throughout the regular season, especially in the playoffs. The team here has been really good on the penalty kill. Didn't have a very good year on the power play until they got Kuzmenko here at the trade deadline. So re-signed Kuzmenko. So we think Kuzmenko and Perry can give the coach some options on the power play. Both shoot right, and everybody else on the power play shoots left. So it was important to get some right-handed shots on the power play. Perry goes to the net front. Kuzmenko can pass the puck, and Armia can help in the penalty kill. And then on the back end, obviously losing Gavrikov, which was a big loss. Went out and signed two kind of veteran defensemen, Dumoulin and Ceci. One shoots left and one shoots right. And then added a goaltender, Anton Forsberg, to pitch in there with Kemper in the net. So we believe we're deeper, a little bit bigger. And now let's see now it's got to happen on the ice.
Ken, when the salary cap and how much it's going to rise over the next couple of years, when that was all announced, a lot of people figured that would contribute to a bunch of player movement that we haven't seen in the past. But it almost seems like it had the reverse effect, that teams were more keen to keep their own players as opposed to the other way around. Do you think that's going to be a trend as the salary cap continues to rise over the years?
I think... my experience is with first off, veteran, the people that become unrestricted free agent, they got to be 27 and older. And, I think the one area that I've, I won't say surprised me a little bit, but there was a time 5, 6, 7 years ago when you started to get to be 33, 34, it looked like those players were maybe going to be kind of fallen by the wayside. It was a younger league. And, the last 2, 3 years, some older players, I'm talking early, mid, later 30s, have had major impacts on their teams and had great seasons. And, I think it speaks to the conditioning of the athletes. Certainly as the salary cap has gone up, when you're an older player and you want to stay and play for $800,000 or $1 million, and now with the cap going up, there's a lot of money to be made for everybody. It's certainly an incentive to hit the gym and train. So, obviously older players have had a real impact on their teams. But ultimately, I think as you get older, it's important to be you want to be on a winning team. You get older, you want to play with some good players. You want to go to the rink every day and have a chance to win and be a playoff team and participate in the playoffs. And you want to live maybe in a city that maybe you grew up in, or that some city is important to you. So I think that there's different things for different people, but I guess it's all to say. I think there is no real blueprint. What I thought the blueprint was a few years ago, that it was becoming a young man's league and the older players were getting phased out. Well, today it's older players are incredibly important. So I don't think there's any real blueprint. You just got to kind of go with the flow, draft, develop, try to put a good team on the ice, and that helps you recruit players to want to come join your program.
Ken, you talk about the attraction of playing with good players on a winning team. The team that's won the Stanley Cup twice in a row and been to the final 3 times in a row was able to keep, its 3 big free agents in-house with what could be perceived as hometown discount deals in terms of Sam Bennett, Brad Marchand, and Aaron Ekblad. There's been a lot of conversation about the inherent advantage that the Florida teams have, the other zero state tax teams have in being able to offer really attractive packages to their players, and the take-home pay is as good as it gets in the U.S., and it can obviously lower the cap hit. As a guy now, a general manager in a state that, to my knowledge, has got to be one of the highest tax states in the U.S., how do you feel about that advantage, and is it a concern?
Well, it's not a concern to me because there's 32 teams, and if a team has an advantage or two, for whatever reason, and you can talk taxes or weather or whatever. There's still 32 teams, and half make the playoffs. And it's, you got to run a good program. You got to draft. You got to develop. You got to try to sign good contracts. And you build a good program. And when you build a good program, people want to stay with it. And so, whatever system, I don't care, whatever system you got, there's going to be some advantages for some teams, some disadvantages. But I do think that when you take care of your business, you can be competitive. So, I think great job by Bill Zito and his people down there in the moves that they've made over the last 3 or 4 years building that team. They've done an amazing job. Other people have done great jobs in their markets, but I just think that the teams that you got to try to we're all trying to do a good job. I mean, and I just think that that's what you strive to do, is do a good job. And if there is some advantages here and there, so be it. But it's not a large portion. It's just it's a small portion, and you just got to keep doing the things that you can do to make your team successful in your marketplace.
Ken Holland is our guest. He's the LA Kings Vice President and General Manager. You guys came into free agency on July the 1st with nearly $16 million in salary cap space. There was a lot of speculation. You guys were looking for one of the big fish in free agency. At what point in time did you get the inclination that you might not have the chance to sign your intended target, and how hard is it to pivot from your intended ideas before free agency actually begins?
Well, I don't know if we had any real intended targets. I think you got to go into these periods of time with multiple plans, and then be ready to move in a whole bunch of different directions, because one team or one person doesn't really dominate or dictate what's going on. There's 32 teams, and then there's the other side. There's players and there's agents. So, this team had a really good year last year, 105 points, I think 6th overall in points. They got some really good young players on the upcome there, Brant Clark and Byfield and LaFerriere and Turcotte, and, some good veteran leadership in Kopitar and Doughty, and then a bunch of players, a number of players that are in the prime of their career. They're good players, Fiala and Kempe and some other, Deneau. So we're just trying to build the team the best that we can. I had a lot of different ideas. Sat here for 2 weeks with our people in a meeting room. Morning from, I don't know, we got there every morning. Started at 7:00, went till about 5:00, and went through a whole number of ideas. Worked the phones with other general managers on whatever trade possibilities would be. And we're ready to go in whatever direction that kind of the marketplace dictated. So we feel good about the things that we were able to accomplish. We still have $4.5 million of cap space. So, we've got some flexibility here going forward. And so, like I said, we feel good about what we were able to accomplish.
Ken, you talked about the importance of drafting and developing. It's always been the specialty of your organizations through the years. What did you make of the new decentralized draft, and how do you like it going forward? I'm
old-fashioned. I really enjoyed the old system, but I do think the draft weekend, for me, it's really about the kids that are being drafted, the young people and their parents, and the memories that they're going to take away from their draft weekend. So, I think it's less important what I feel about, me personally, if I like it here or I like it there, or I'm sure, I'll talk to lots of general managers, and ultimately, Gary Bettman and Bill Daly and Colin Campbell and the league and the NHLPA will make a decision on what they think is the best way to go. But I just want to make sure that it's a great weekend for the kids and their parents.
You clearly still have some work to do with regards to free agency. Again, July 1st was just yesterday, but it wouldn't be a Ken Holland appearance on TSN 1050 if we didn't inquire about the annual golf trip that you go on. We know Doug Armstrong is a big part of it as well, the president of the St. Louis Blues. Can you take us through the destination this summer?
But I was about every 3 or 4 years I go to Europe for about a week. So I'm trying to grab a week in August over in Europe, and then get back at it. So still work the phones here for the next little while. Don't really have any ARB cases on our plate, so that's about it.
Uh-huh.
We're going to grab a week in August. Quick little week over and back, and then looking forward to September and start going to the rink and getting at it.
Are we talking Scotland, Ireland, or what are we looking at, Ken?
Those are my two favorites, are Scotland and Ireland. I've never really gone anywhere other than Scotland and Ireland on a golf trip. I just, it's always fun to be on the ocean, Royal County Down and Royal Portrush and Turnberry and some of those courses that host British Opens are special places to be. So I always include 1, 2, or 3 of those courses on a trip because you get to watch them on TV. They're world famous and they're great courses. So this year we're playing 2 or 3 of those courses, and then some other really good, I call them B courses. And it's a week, and then over and back, and then I'll be back I think by the middle of August, and I'll start be in LA and start getting ready for training camp.
Well, if you need a couple extra guys, Ken, Dave and I are available, so you just let us know, all right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, as long as you got single-digit cappers.
We got it. Yeah, There's a guy on the show who shot 64, so it's.
Well, we don't want. That's too.
No,
good.
no, yeah.
That's too good.
Yeah, okay.
He's gonna take all the money on.
Yeah, that is true. That is a very good point. Well, thanks so much for taking the time for us. Best of luck going forward here, and enjoy the summer the best you can.
Thanks, you too. Thanks, guys.
All right, that's Ken Holland, the GM, vice president of the LA Kings. And for years, Ken Holland's been in the NHL, been appearing on the station since the inception of the station, since 2011, right?
Yeah.
And I remember being a producer, a show called Mako and Cause, and we booked Ken Holland when he was with the Red Wings. Mm-hmm. And I remember I'm a massive golf fan. I love going on golf trips and playing golf. And he brought up how he was going on this trip to Scotland. He's like, here's my number. Anytime you're heading over there, you let me know. I'll give you all the recommendations you need. And, I mean, you need a lot of money to go over to play golf in Scotland and England and Ireland, needless to say. But those guys have it down pat. I know Darren Pang goes on that trip as well.
Nice.
Doug Armstrong, a heavy NHL contingent. That'd be a lot of fun to be out there with those guys.
That'd be a good one.
Yeah, I know. Maybe my next life. You never know. You might be a late. There might be a late scratch, and they call you. Yeah, wouldn't that be something? Ken's like, you know what? I like the cut of that kid's jib.
Yeah,
we got to include him.
Why not?
We got to include him. You never know. OverDrive brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. We have Thatcher Demko of the Vancouver Canucks in about 20 minutes as we continue here on this Wednesday afternoon.
Back to Overdrive with Hayes, Noodles, and the O-Dog.
Just keep it safe with me. Anything you say will always stay with me. No matter what.
Back on Overdrive, Thatcher Demko in about 15 minutes. Talked a lot about NHL free agency day one. I've not talked a lot about the NBA and what was going on there. How about that Damian Lillard story out of Milwaukee where they decide to stretch $113 million over 5 years?
The stretch wave.
The stretch wave. So they get rid of Lillard. They ultimately bring in Miles Turner from Indiana. It was a huge part of that Pacers team that went to the NBA Finals, all in an effort to placate Giannis, who could still, in theory, just say, I'm still out of here.
Yeah.
Although I imagine Giannis probably had some kind of heads up that a deal like this was going to happen. They lose Lillard, who, again, has a torn Achilles and is 35 years old. Who knows what he's going to be able to do the rest of his NBA career. But bringing in Miles Turner, I suppose that keeps Milwaukee in the mix. But that's a lot of money, $113 million to give a guy over a 5-year period.
Yeah.
Only in the NBA, not to play for your franchise.
And now every team in the league wants him at the minimum.
Oh, for sure.
Essentially get him, at a massive bargain. And you take a gamble. It's a very low-risk gamble in NBA terms because, look, there haven't been a lot of great success stories of guys coming back from Achilles surgeries. But Kevin Durant's one. He popped the Achilles in 2019, and he's had some very good, productive years thereafter. So there's also a lot of stories of guys that pop it and they never really get back to where they were. They were, 70% of what they were, 60%.
Like Klay Thompson, he had the Achilles and the ACL in successive years, and he's a good shooter, but Klay Thompson was one of the better players in the NBA, and now he's more like a third or fourth man on a legit team in Dallas. So you never really know what
never know, but Durant's 7 foot or damn near close and is one of the best shooters in the history of the sport. Dame, of course, a more explosive, much shorter guy. I don't love the odds of him coming back and actually having impact, but let's hope for the best for him.
Yeah, we talk about tampering or lack thereof in professional sports. DeAndre Ayton was cut a couple of days ago and clears waivers at 5:00. And who would think that a team that is in desperate need of a center, who could really use a center in the NBA? A team with LeBron, a team with Luka Doncic. DeAndre Ayton. The expectation is he lands in LA to play for the Lakers. I just wonder how that could possibly happen.
Yeah.
I mean, was there any communication with Ayton's agent and perhaps LeBron and all the guys with the Lakers? I would guess that's exactly it. But that's a hell of a pickup for the Lakers who don't have to give up anything for a decent center. And remember, they were going to trade a couple of draft picks for Mark Williams, and then the physical failed. So the Lakers are in pretty decent position there, picking up Ayton for nothing.
It's nice to pick up a guy for nothing when you actually have nothing to give.
Like zero.
They have no trade material. I mean, I guess, outside of players that they actually need. And so, it's a very good signing for the Lakers, as flawed and as, questionable a character as DeAndre Ayton is. Hey, man, he can play, and, he's a body, and he doesn't cost you anything.
Yeah, and I mean, the salaries in the NBA, like some of the deals that we saw, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander sign a deal that'll pay him almost $72 million per season. And again, a guy like that doesn't scream as crazy to me as something like Pirtle making $26 million a year as like the league's 9th best center. And I get it, Pirtle, very valuable piece to the current and the future prospects of the Toronto Raptors. 26 mil, man! What a sport! What a league! Why am I not taller and more athletic, Dave?
It's 26 million, and you don't know how to shoot. Imagine what you'd be making.
Cannot shoot.
Imagine what you'd be making if you could shoot in a game where the object of the game is to put the ball in the basket, and you're not very good at that part of it. It's amazing. No, it's a wonderful blessing to be an NBA player, and to be one of the best is beyond belief. And, the idea that these guys are making that type of money, the $100 million player is not too far away, AK.
Definitely not. We should also mention the Knicks will hire, I should say, Mike Brown as their next head coach, according to ESPN. And
the 12th choice.
We remember the process by which, literally every NBA team, can we hire your coach?
No.
And every NBA team, except for the Raptors, who apparently...
Darko did not get the
Darko
call.
Must be like, hey, anyone want to ask if I'm interested in the Knicks job? It's very insulting that he wasn't asked. But, it's pretty clear that the Knicks went with maybe their 12th option in Mike Brown. So congratulations to him.
Hey, CAA, the agency, essentially runs the Knicks. Leon Rose is former head of CAA basketball. So don't worry, Raptor fans. They've hired CAA to find a new president. It ought to go really well, AK.
It most certainly will.
It ought to go well.
Raptors fans are feeling great about the current prospects of their team, even without Masai Ujiri
CAA
at the helm.
It could be a roadside breakdown, CAA.
It could be. It could be. That's hour one. Hour two ahead. Thatcher Demko, Keegan Matheson on the Jays. Game 3 tonight against the Yanks after a stellar first two. See what the Jays have in store in Game 3 tonight. Hour number 2 is next.
This is OverDrive with Hayes, Noodles, and the O-Dog on TSN 1050.
OverDrive, hour number 2 on a gorgeous Wednesday afternoon in Scarborough, Ontario. Aaron Karolnik, Dave Feschuk from the Star until 7 o'clock. We've got Keegan Matheson joining us from the Dome ahead of Jays and Yankees Game 3 in about 30 minutes after what was one of the wilder games you'll ever see. A wild 7th inning on Canada Day. Maybe a little homage back to the Jose Bautista bat flip inning, which was a ridiculous inning. The number of events that led to the bat flip in the 7th inning for Joey Bats. And then, of course, everything yesterday culminating in the 7th inning grand slam for George Springer, who had an all-time performance. And this is a guy who's rejuvenated his career. 2 homers, 7 RBIs, a career high for George Springer. And we'll see what the Jays have in store. Bo Bichette will not play, at least will not start tonight for the Jays, which is a little bit of a buzzkill because, I mean, I want to see this team fully healthy. They're playing so well without Bichette, without Santander, without Varsho. Let's get these guys back, and we'll see what we're really cooking with.
Well, on the flip side, like, be patient, wait till everybody's healthy, and ride this while you can, because they've got a little magic cooking right now, AK, and I don't think they need anybody in particular. This is a group effort.
Yeah, and we're still waiting for some more signings to break in the NHL. There was a bunch of action yesterday, of course, and it sounds like Nick Ehlers is getting close to a decision. Pius Suter close to decision, apparently not going back to the Vancouver Canucks, according to a variety of reports. And I suppose our next guest would be able to confirm that. Maybe he wants to share where Pius Suter is going. And I might be butchering the pronunciation of his name. Pius?
I think you're okay.
That's probably close enough.
Okay.
Joining us now on the Maple Toyota hotline, fresh off a 3-year contract extension with the Vancouver Canucks, is Thatcher Demko. Congratulations, man. How you doing?
I'm good, yeah. Super excited. It was a busy couple days there, kind of finalizing everything, but ultimately got the paperwork done, and really excited to be going back.
So how does it work? Like, you get the papers signed? Like, do you throw a party with all your friends and family? Like, what's going on in the Demko household?
Just back in the gym yesterday morning. I'm sure we'll find time to celebrate here, but I know I got my work cut out for me this summer, and been in good rhythm, good routine, feeling really good, and just want to keep that momentum going. So definitely not going off the rails for a couple days or anything, but we'll find our own way to celebrate here.
Hey, Thatcher, I heard Canucks president Jim Rutherford was talking about you on Toronto radio, and he mentioned that you kind of acquired a new trainer recently out of Kelowna, and he in his eyes, it looks like that's been really good for you. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, obviously went through a hard stretch last year and kind of just came to the realization that I had to change some things up and really kind of push for some new results, and came across this guy through some recommendations from a ton of different guys around the league, and he's kind of a biomechanics specialist for goaltending specifically, and just it's been great. It really opened my eyes, educated me, I think, first and foremost, about different things that I could do in the gym, and again, it's very goaltending specific, so it's really cool to see the correlation, off the ice, and then obviously transitioning into some of those more specific on-ice positions as well.
Our guest is Thatcher Demko, fresh off a 3-year contract extension with the Canucks. I'm sure you're pretty thrilled to see Connor Garland get locked up as well. Brock Besser coming back to Vancouver on a 7-year deal. Were you surprised at all the transactions that Alvin and Rutherford were able to pull off yesterday?
Kudos to those guys for sure. I think ultimately, it comes down to our guys in the room, and obviously our locker room went through some stuff last year, and the media took hold of it, and I think the outside narrative kind of turned out pretty negative at the end of the year, but we kind of had a meeting with our leadership group, and it really was up to us to say, hey, are we going to stick around? And I think having these guys come back, it shows the league, it shows the media that we are all in, and things aren't as bad as they seemed last year for us. And we're 2 years out from winning our division. I think last year we were probably just a handful of points shy from missing the playoffs. So, getting the gang back together and having guys stick around, I think proves that we're really excited to run it back and prove to kind of the media and the outside world that things aren't as bad as they seem in Vancouver.
Yeah, it's interesting, Thatcher. I mean, when you think about what actually happened last year, I mean, things aren't as bad as they seem. I mean, what will be different this year, or what gives you the confidence that things will be different this year?
Well, I think there's just some uncertainty with what was going to happen with our locker room at the end of the day, and it puts guys in tough positions when there's not a ton of security in the locker room. And, obviously everybody knows about all the drama that went into the Elias Pettersson and JT Miller stuff. And, that really affected our room in a negative way. And I think coming into this year with a fresh slate and, really being able to say that we know who's going to be in our locker room and from a leadership group standpoint is going to provide just a ton of security for guys and free guys up to feel like themselves and play their best hockey.
So here in Toronto, there's been a bunch of talk about the media and its effect on the on-ice performance of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Do you think, and you play in Vancouver, a Canadian hockey market, you guys have a ton of coverage from the local media. How does the media affect what you guys do on the ice, if at all?
I don't know. I don't want to get in trouble with you guys, but yeah, I mean,
go ahead. No one's listening.
It can be hard sometimes, for sure. We are people at the end of the day, and I know, we're in a position where there is a lot that's asked from us, and part of being a pro hockey player is learning to deal with the media, especially when you're in these, bigger markets with kind of thicker media around us. But, everyone's got a job to do, whether it's us or you guys. And I think at the end of the day, as long as, the media is coming to us with, respectful intentions, there's not a lot of hostility. Obviously, sometimes those lines get crossed, but that's a small minority. So, yeah, I mean, it's different in every market, but it's part of what makes the NHL so fun.
Thatcher Demko is our guest of the Vancouver Canucks. He signed a 3-year extension with the team yesterday. You've got a great tandem with Kevin Lankinen, and everyone around the hockey world, Thatcher, would say when you're healthy, you're one of the best goaltenders in the NHL. But, of course, health has been an issue for you over the last couple of years. How are you training in the off-season to prepare for the upcoming year, and what do you think a realistic workload would be for you this coming season?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like the injury stuff for me, I think it really started to take effect probably, 12, 13 months ago. Before that, I had a Vezina caliber season. So, I don't feel like I'm that far off from doing that again. And so it's really, like I mentioned, I've been in contact with this biomechanics specialist guy that's really helped shape my programming for my summer. Kind of brought in some new ideologies and things like that. And, I feel really good, coming out of last year healthy, finally able to have, kind of a more normal summer as far as that goes without having to deal with all the rehab and stuff that I did last summer. It's great for my body. It's great for my mind, and first and foremost as well. So, yeah, I mean, things are going in a great direction for me. I feel good. I feel happy, and obviously excited to be back in Vancouver next year.
Yeah, it's incredible news for the Vancouver Canucks and their fans, no doubt. Thatcher Demko with us. As far as the length of the contract that you signed, a 3-year extension, how did it come to be that number? Were you angling for a longer-term deal? Are you maybe potentially looking to capitalize on a rising salary cap in a few years? Can you take us through why 3 years?
Yeah, I mean, I would sign 20 years in Vancouver if I could have. I've always wanted to be there my whole career. I'm a guy that I think there's a bit of a dying breed, and the guys that get drafted somewhere and kind of want to see it through no matter what adversity hits. And yeah, so I mean, I would have signed for a longer time. I know the team's in a position that, maybe a little bit of uncertainty with like you said, my health last year, but we felt confident that I was going to be able to get back to the position that I was in 2 years ago. And at the end of the day, if I got to sign 3 and then get to the end of that one and sign another one, then so be it. I think my priority was just getting something done making sure that I get more years in Vancouver.
Hey, Thatcher, another guy that's going to be entering your situation there is a hometown guy, Evander Kane, acquired in a trade from the Oilers, a guy who scored 300-plus NHL goals in his career. What's it going to mean to have him on board?
Yeah, I think he brings a lot of versatility, you know. He's got a little bit of a grindy side to him, which I think is going to be great for our forward group. And you know, pretty tough guy, pretty strong guy, and he can play a tough style of game, which, like I said, is going to fit well with us, I think. And you know, at the same time, like you said, he can score goals and he can produce, which is going to be huge for us as well. So I think there's a lot of different aspects that his game might be able to bring to our team, and you know, I think he's going to fit in within our group great.
Well, congratulations on the new contract. We're thrilled for you, and we wish you nothing but the best this summer. And we look forward to seeing Thatcher Demko, Vezina finalist, back in 2025, 2026. We appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
All right, that's Thatcher Demko of the Canucks, who I am cheering for now. Now, sometimes you talk to athletes, and they don't give you much. You talk to a lot more athletes than I have over the years, Dave, and there's not maybe the most transparency when it comes to their thoughts. I thought Thatcher Demko, a very thoughtful individual, a guy that has had to deal with injuries. And as a goalie, I can't even imagine how frustrating that is. And you remember when he was coming back from the injury, he was like backing up and wasn't starting and was in there, was out. And there were so many questions about what was going on with that knee that he was dealing with. And it seems like he's in a good place now, and he's an easy guy to cheer for.
Yeah, I mean, look, the guy came second in Vezina voting the year before, right? This is a top-notch talent. And I think if you're a Vancouver Canucks fan, like, hearing what he just said about this room believing that, you know, all the dysfunction that we heard about last year is behind them and that they can actually make it a place where it's more harmonious and more pulling on the same rope for the same cause after all, you know, all we heard last year, that was interesting stuff.
Demko joined us on the Maple Toyota hotline. Drive the built-in Canada fuel-efficient, fun-to-drive Toyota RAV4 gas or hybrid models available. Visit mapletoyota.com. I also think what he said about playing in a Canadian market, the pressures of the media was fascinating, and maybe he didn't give us his full thoughts on that. Maybe a little bit cautious because that's always a hot-button topic in this country about how much the media can affect a team. And of course, when you're the Edmonton Oilers, you're going to back-to-back Stanley Cup finals. The media's not posing any problems. But in Vancouver, I do feel like it must have been a little bit different. Every single day they're going in there and talking about Miller and Pettersson.
Yeah.
This guy said this guy said that. And then you compare and contrast that what was going on in Toronto, where, I mean, I don't even think it was remotely close to as far as the dysfunction that was going on in Vancouver. So, I mean, I can't even fathom what was going on there relative to what is or what has been going on here in Toronto. But I do think it's just inevitable that would take a toll on a locker room and miss the playoffs because of it. I'm not going to say because of it, but there were a bunch of injuries and other stuff that was going on, underperformance, and who knows how to quantify what attributes to what. But you heard that Demko say that it definitely had an effect on them.
Well, as it should. I mean, look, you could talk about the chicken and the egg there. Is the media becoming oppressive because the media is oppressive, or is the media becoming oppressive because you're underperforming and the media is just asking the questions about why is this team that had such a great season the year before, you know, in the middle of an absolute downward spiral to not making the playoffs? Like that, those were legitimate questions. And look, the idea that there was massive dysfunction there and that they needed to make a change wasn't exactly a secret. And guess what? They made a change by trading JT Miller out of town.
And a new coach in Adam Foote as well, and a couple new contracts for guys like Demko, like Garland, and like Brock Besser, who's back on a 7-year term. When it comes to pressure, Mitch Marner, I think it's fair to say, will be facing a different type of pressure in Vegas versus what he was facing here in Toronto. And I thought Kelly McCrimmon, the GM of the Vegas Golden Knights, had some really interesting things to say about the pressure in Vegas compared to the pressure in Toronto and what Mitch Marner could be facing as the newest member of the Golden Knights. Here's how it sounded yesterday.
Well, we have lots of pressure here, Ed. We internally have pressure on our team. We want to win. Our guys our guys put pressure on themselves as much as players in any other team. I think that Toronto is a, mega market. It's a huge market, so there's pressure there. He's a local boy. He's the, I don't have it in front of me, but he's the top time on ice, top scoring. He's led every category for the Maple Leafs in the playoffs. They haven't had the success that they wanted. But you know what? And I only just briefly touched on it. It's our job as managers to make sure our team is good enough to win. Toronto's team was built a little bit differently through those years, and not to speak to how they do their business, but they were really victimized by the flat cap. They made the decisions that they made on the players that they made them on, and with, you can see now with cap growth, I mean, like you're just amazed that, geez, this guy got that. This, well, when the cap is growing, those contracts would have, been a smaller percentage of the cap as time went on. So they walked right into the flat cap.
Now, Kelly McCrimmon is right in that you think about the contracts the Leafs signed back in those days before the pandemic, and then the flat cap era, which was 3, 4, 5 years, and we're finally getting out of that situation in the NHL. You sign Nylander, you sign Matthews, you sign Marner, and I think the expectation then from Kyle Dubas, in fact, I know the expectation then from Kyle Dubas is like, well, this cap will be rising, and as such, these contracts won't be as onerous for us. We'll still be able to augment the rest of our roster by maybe keeping Nazem Kadri, maybe keeping Zach Hyman, amongst others. And then the salary cap remained stagnant.
Yeah.
And that killed the Toronto Maple Leafs, probably more so than other teams because they were looking at it in a different way. And they took an aggressive swing and they got screwed by the pandemic, which is just true. But another thing Kelly McCrimmon didn't say is that regardless of the flat cap, if you don't get quality performances from your best players in the postseason, it doesn't matter who else you have on your roster. And I get it. The Florida Panthers, they had 9 great forwards in their Stanley Cup playoff run. Like their first line, second line, third line, that you can make a case that they're all first lines. They all were first lines in this most recent Stanley Cup run. But, I mean, Kelly McCrimmon isn't going to be like, well, yeah, we just gave Marner 8 years, $12 million a year, and he's been junk in the playoffs for the most part. But I think the reality is that the entirety of the Toronto Maple Leafs high-priced players, including Morgan Riley, are all in the same boat. It's all the same. So you could say, oh, it's a good what if pandemic didn't happen, what the Toronto Maple Leafs would have looked like. They could have had this player and this player and this player. But when it boils down to it, if your best players don't perform, who cares?
Yeah. I mean, it's a nice defense.
It is. He's got to defend. He's got to defend his new guy. I think that's safe to say, and that's the easiest way to do it.
It's a nice defense of Mitch Marner and the failed era that he just left here in Toronto, but it doesn't hold water at all. Because to your point, it's like, first of all, to my knowledge, every other team in the NHL was playing with a flat cap too.
Very true.
So I'm not sure how the Leafs were somehow, hurt by that more. It doesn't make sense to me because the math's the same for everybody. And yeah, let's be honest here. You talk about pressure. You can make the case, AK, that the bar is so low here in Toronto. People like this franchise hasn't been to a Stanley Cup final since the league had 6 teams, right? So the bar is so low in Toronto. Like Brendan Shanahan was going to get a contract extension. He had 2 playoff series wins in the 9-year run, 11 years on the job. If he would have won 3 playoff series, he had a contract extension. Yeah, they were going to keep him around.
A lifetime deal, probably.
So 3 playoff series in 9 years of playoff runs and 11 years on the job. They were going to keep him around as team president. You think the owner in Vegas is going to keep Kelly McCrimmon around?
Not a chance.
If he wins 3 playoff series in the next 9 runs, it ain't happening.
They are very cutthroat. Bill Foley and company in Vegas, they want to win. They want to win now. And there's no excuses. That's why they go out and make these big swings. And I can guarantee you, before the summer's over, they will have a replacement for Alex Pietrangelo on the right side of that defense. And it'll be somebody good.
Yeah.
Like, they're not going to mess around here. They are going to find somebody good to replace Pietrangelo. They have Mitch Marner play on the top line with Jack Eichel, who probably will also get a massive contract extension for the Vegas Golden Knights. They're going to figure out a way to make it work. They want to win a Stanley Cup. And, of course, here in Toronto, we kind of are pondering the legacy of Mitch Marner. And I was thinking about the comparisons to Vince Carter, not in the way that the two players went out, which are not comparable at all. You were probably there in 2005, Dave, when Vince returned as a member of the Nets. And
I was.
Yeah, what do you have, 42 points that night?
Yeah.
One of his best games. Like, he was absolutely incredible. Again, Vince Carter, a guy who was averaging 15 a game for the Raps, goes to the Nets, was averaging almost 28 points per game.
Yeah.
So it was clear he quit. Mitch Marner not in the same boat. And I would actually argue that Mitch Marner was better as a Toronto Maple Leaf than Vince Carter was a Toronto Raptor.
Yeah.
I understand why Vince Carter, you make the argument for the retire. And I'm not talking about retiring Marner's number or anything like that. I don't think his number should be retired. No, I don't think under any circumstance that should happen. I also feel the same way about Vince Carter. Now, his number's already retired, so what are you going to do?
Yeah.
And I think the reasons for that were more so almost off the court. Oh, the impact he made in Canadian basketball and the
Kids
growth
liked
of this.
him.
Exactly. That I think was the pitch. But as far as the on-court performance, correct me if I'm wrong, the Raptors with Vince Carter were at 500 or below.
500 team.
Sub 500 team.
Yeah.
Mitch Marner, I mean, they made the playoffs every single year. He was on the team.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, when you compare the two legacies, I get it. People are really pissed off now. But Vince Carter got like 100% cheers recently. And I know
that took a long time.
It did take a long time, and it also took the Raptors winning the NBA championship. That you cannot discount.
Yes.
That is probably the reason they were able to make the case, all right, let's retire Vince's number. We're going to have a miserable season anyway. Let's have something to build it around. If the Leafs win a Stanley Cup in 2 years and Mitch Marner comes back in 10 years, maybe he will be celebrated for the incredible regular season achievements he's had in Toronto. But I think when you compare the two players, it's actually a fascinating case study in why we remember them the way we will. And again, Marner, it's very fresh. Just a couple of days since he's left the Toronto Maple Leafs. But like the Vince stuff was years and years of booing and vitriol and hate.
Oh, it was 100% hate.
It
too.
was.
I think that's one of the key differences for me. Like when you think about Vegas at Toronto next season, whenever that happens, we haven't seen the schedule
There
yet.
will be a lot of boos. I don't know if it would be 100% boos, but there will be a lot of boos.
For Vince, it was 100%. Like I've been in a lot of those hate games. Like I was at the Tavares game, first time back to Long Island.
LeBron's had one.
Kawhi
I
was at the LeBron one in Cleveland, the first, and there was, people were throwing pennies and all the rest of the nonsense that they were doing. The Tavares game as you approached Nassau Coliseum, the wafting smell of burning polyester jerseys was in the air, and they were burning a bunch of them out in front, and they gave him the gears and they gave him every chant in the book, and they blew out the Leafs that night too. The Leafs didn't show up to the game, which obviously made it even more inflammatory in terms of we don't need you and Barzell's better and all the rest.
Barzell's better.
All the rest of the stuff.
What a chant.
All the rest. But you know what? Like I actually think, judging by my interaction with the people that read the Star, the people you interact with on the street, very unscientific. I feel like there's a good percentage of people that really love Mitch Marner still, and really feel they put it on the Leafs. They put it on Leafs management.
Yeah, that's reasonable.
They put it on Shanahan. They put it on his other teammates. There's people who say, "Hey, what about Matthews? Why is this guy the scapegoat? Matthews hasn't shown up in game, never scored a goal in a winner-take-all game. He's never had a big signature game to get them over a hump." So I feel like it's a lot more split than it was when Carter left because A, the point you made, Vince just plain quit and everybody saw it, and B, because Marner's a polarizing character.
Yeah, and I do think that when we look back on the how it all went down, right, and the possibilities of what the Leafs could have done with Mitch Marner a couple of years ago, and he talked about it yesterday, the idea of, there were trade rumors, trade discussions regarding Mitch Marner before his no trade kicked in. And we remember what happened in that offseason. Kyle Dubas left the Leafs. They bring in Tree Living. Shanahan apparently calls the core for, hey, you guys are sticking around, and the rest is history.
That might have been
that might have been
death knell right there.
Well, sure. And then, of course, we know once you have the no-move clause, last offseason, hey, Vegas, Shea Theodore, yada, yada, yada. That didn't end up panning out. And then the three-way trade that was reported that at least was being discussed at the trade deadline this past year with Carolina and Rantanen, and how that all could have played out, we'll never know. But again, Mitch Marner negotiated a no-move clause in his deal.
Yeah.
He had a wife that was 7 or 8 months pregnant. Why should he go anywhere? He is not obligated to do anything. So I think those who are saying, oh, Marner should have should have waived to go to Carolina or should have waived to go to Vegas. Like, no, he should not have.
No, I don't know how you could blame him for that.
Well, no, again, if you want to blame anybody for how it all went down, and when it boils down to it, at the end of the day, the Maple Leafs got Nicholas Waugh in exchange for Mitch Marner.
Yeah.
That's it. That's a horrible return for one of the league's preeminent wingers. But there was an opportunity for them to make a deal a couple of years ago. They opted not to do it. And then the no trade kicks in, which they negotiated themselves. There is no one else to blame here except the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yeah, that's on Shanahan. That's on the dysfunction between Shanahan and Dubas that turned that offseason into a debacle with essentially a palace coup that went awry. And Kyle Dubas is suddenly in Pittsburgh, and Brendan Shanahan's reeling in the wake, looking for another suit to occupy the chair, and he finally gets Brad Treliving. But you couldn't expect Brad Treliving to hit the ground running and trade Mitch Marner as his first act as the new GM. That would have had to been Shanahan making that decision.
That's exactly it. He didn't want to. He believed in the core four and that foundation.
Goes on his tombstone.
It does. Like that is what he went to the well with time and time again. And now, heading into this season, Marner's gone, Michelli, Nick Waugh are in. And what do you have? Give a core 2, a core 3, but really we got to put an end to those core whatever, because the Florida Panthers, I should say, they've got a core 8. I don't know, a big group of a core, and they're looking for another
sign
Stanley
through 2030.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that may come back to bite them, but
it will. No, that's an inevitability. It will. Like
it always does.
3 or 4 years when all these guys are that much older and that much wear and tear, that team could suck. But everyone in Florida, when they're partying at the elbow room, like, remember Marshy, remember Kachuk and Barkov, and
they'll go back to not watching hockey.
And that's exactly what will happen. It's like, what are the Gators up to this offseason? So we've got Chris Johnston joining us in about 30 minutes, our hockey insider. We're looking for the latest on guys like Nick Ehlers, maybe some trade buzz with regards to the Toronto Maple Leafs, some linking of the Leafs and the Flames with regards to Nazem Kadri. We'll get CJ's thoughts on that. But the big game in the city tonight, Jays, Yankees, down at the Dome. We'll head down there to catch up with MLB.com's Keegan Matheson next.
Back to Overdrive with Hayes, Noodles, and the O-Dog.
Hour 2 continues. I missed the, what do they call it, the bumper there? I don't know. I should probably know this. I've been working radio for a while.
The Tap Man would be appalled.
The Tap Man would be disgusted with me, but he usually is. I'm Aaron
Miss the
Korolnik.
post, JP.
Miss the post. Thank you, JP. So that's a true radio veteran, JP, behind the glass. Doogie, those two are doing fantastic work, as always. They will get our man Keegan Matheson from MLB.com on the line soon. Jays, Yanks, game number 3 tonight from the Dome. And I kind of had 2015, 2016 vibes yesterday. I mean, it was Canada Day, the red jerseys, a sellout crowd, the Yankees, and the Jays just bludgeoning the Bronx Bombers. I loved every second of it. And George Springer, that grand slam, I don't know if there's a way to calculate how loud it is in the Rogers Center relative to other games or other seasons, but that must have been like pretty high up there because it sounded like the roof, if it was on, because of course it was open, beautiful day. I mean, I don't know what was going on there. Look at that. Oh, what a home run up on TSN 2.
We'll have to ask Keegan, but I believe Keegan had something on Twitter basically saying that was as loud as he's heard it in a long time.
All right, let's go to the source. Keegan Matheson, where did that George Springer home run rank for you as far as loudest moments in the Rogers Center?
It's been a while, fellas. I started covering this team in 2017, so I really showed up after all the fun stuff happened, but that's up there. Absolutely. And even with the Dome open, there was no roof there to keep everything in. It was an organic moment and a hell of a crowd, too, yesterday. Fantastic. So that was up there, man. The ball hung up in the air to add a little drama to it, which is always cool. It was not a no-doubter by any means, but that was a pop. It was an incredible day here.
So the Jays put up 12 runs yesterday. No Bo Bichette, no Anthony Santander, no Dalton Varsho. Vlad and Alejandro Kirk go 0 for 9 combined, and still the Jays were able to do it, and it was in large part due to George Springer, who's had a true renaissance season, and I don't think there were very, very many people out there who thought Springer was going to be able to bounce back like he was a Houston Astro once again, but that's the type of performance we've been seeing from him this season. What do you attribute this return to greatness for George Springer to?
He seems re-energized, guys. There's a lot of baseball reasons, mechanical reasons into this, but on a surface level, like, this guy is alive again. And I was dead wrong about George Springer this season. I thought it was going to keep going in a bad direction and get worse, because last year he looked like he was slowing down. He did not look like he had that same jump in his step, and for such a gifted athlete too, right? In spring training, it looked terrible. And I know that spring training doesn't matter for much, but it stretches on for 6 weeks, and you need to talk about something. And it did not look good. And I remember, guys, it was a late spring training, March 17th or 18th. I went up to George before one of those spring games, and I said, listen, man, this isn't going well. I've got to write about it. Let's talk. And I was so surprised at the time with how optimistic he was. And he said, I feel great. Everything's going exactly how I want it to go. And at the time, I'm standing there thinking, okay, sure. But it's worked. And he was right about this. He's chasing more power, which I think is really important, because George is an incredible athlete. I don't even think it comes through the TV well, but this guy could be a linebacker in the NFL. He is big and tall and built strong, and that's always been in there. But now he's allowing himself to chase it just a little bit more. He's getting away from that let's hit 20 singles approach that plagued this team, I think, last year and in prior years. He's uncorking it a bit, man. He's letting it fly, and it's working. And you see a player who is having fun at the ballpark again. Because when you are not having fun here and you got to be here every damn day, it piles up on you. We've seen how that looks. Now we see how the good George Springer looks. And it's been incredible. I could not have been more wrong about him this year.
Well, Keegan, when you look at this, the power production in general from this team, there's been quite an explosion of late. Like, what do you sort of link it to? What are the factors that have led this team that looked like it was kind of playing small ball at times at its worst moments is suddenly playing big AL East ball?
AL East ball is a great way to put it. This is who they should have been for a few years. And it's always felt, guys, like that 2021 team. Remember when Marcus Semien was hitting 40-plus? That was Vladdy's near MVP year. That was such an incredibly fun brand of baseball. And they pulled back from that, and we haven't seen that since. Now, the Jays started out this season among the bottom teams in home runs in Major League Baseball for too long. But this last month and a half or so, they've really come to life. Now, part of that is just personnel. It's who they have in the lineup. But they're also chasing better matchups this year. And what I mean by that, guys, is that last year, I think the Blue Jays sat down each day and tried to put together the best defensive lineup possible that could make a lot of contact. That's an okay way to win some 3-2 ball games, but it's not the most entertaining, and you need to play pretty near perfect. What they're doing this year is sitting down and trying to make their best offense. Their defense is good enough by default. Everyone on this roster can play defense, but they're chasing matchups at the bottom of the order. They're chasing platoons. They're chasing upside, which is a hell of a lot more fun to watch, as we're seeing, and the results are there. So I think this comes a little bit from coaching, a little bit from the player side, but they're chasing that high-end outcome instead of just looking for singles and contact, which was only working every once in a while. It was a decent way to be good, but very rarely great. And we're seeing now the opposite of that, and it's working.
Keegan Matheson, our guest here in Hour 2 of Overdrive. He covers the Blue Jays for MLB.com. Jose Barrios on the hill tonight if the Jays win, tied with the Yanks atop the AL East. Keegan, what can you tell us about some of the injury situations the Jays are facing? Bichette, Santander, and who am I missing? Who's the last? Dalton Varsho.
Varsho, yeah.
The hamstring injury. Well, what's going on with that trio?
So starting off with Bo, since he is closest, he was out in the field taking BP today. He looked good. Still wouldn't stun me if he was a little late addition, kind of the wrestler running in at the end here. We'll see. But if he's out today, probably back tomorrow. Dalton Varsho is soon going to start running the bases down in Dunedin, which means he's close. I'd expect him back maybe just before the All-Star break. And if he is, great, because he's a good baseball player, but also because that simplifies that crowded, kind of messy outfield group right now. So that would really simplify that for him. And then Santander is the more mysterious one. Guys, this has taken a long time, and when you look at how long he's been out, there has not been any swinging. He's not hitting off a tee. He's not hitting in the cage. And Ross Atkins told us yesterday that there was a subluxation involved in that, which means the shoulder kind of just popped out and back in, and that can strain the ligaments around it too. So that's been curious. And when he was in the lineup, guys, as you know, he was not producing whatsoever early in the season. So my worry with Santander, maybe more my curiosity is a better way to say it, he's a notoriously slow starter. So when he comes back from this injury, is this starting again? Does he need to ramp up slowly again? We'll see. But this lineup needs the best version of him. It's just got to be that good version, which we haven't seen yet.
So there have been moments this season, Keegan, where there have been debates on this very radio station about whether the Blue Jays will be buyers or sellers at the July 31st trade deadline. I don't think there's any debate now. I mean, they have to be buyers. It's just unfathomable they could be sellers. And I guess what? We're into July now, and what should they be buying if they're starting to sort of fill out their shopping list with less than a month to go until the deadline?
I think they should be aggressive, number one. This is the year to do it. You look at the Yankees leading the AL East, they're right here. They're right there for the Blue Jays to take a run at the division, not the third wild card, not just being happy to be invited to the party, but the division, the legitimate way to get into the playoffs with the division. It's right there. There's not a lot of powerhouses in the American League this year. This is the year to be aggressive. And the Jays have the prospects to do that. Unless you're trying to trade for Shohei Ohtani, they have the prospects. That's not going to be a problem. Ross Atkins highlighted a right-handed bat, and I think that makes a lot of sense. Maybe a guy they can chase some more platoon advantages with. You're going to see the normal bullpen tinkering, probably an arm added there. The big question, guys, is rotation depth. Now, 3 weeks from now, who is Max Scherzer? We'll see. Is Alek Manoah getting closer to coming back? We will see. But they need to make sure that they're not an injury away from disaster. And they've been there a couple of times. Eric Lauer has saved them. Man, I cannot give him enough credit. They need to make sure that there's nowhere on this roster that one injury would screw it all up. And I think the rotation is probably a place to pad that. The spot that interests me the most, guys, is beyond this year. When they added Jose Barrios back in 2021, he had a year remaining. They were getting ahead a year on business. I think that makes sense this year. They're going to be losing Scherzer, losing Bassett. Gosman's a year away. If they can add a guy with some control, swing even bigger, this is the time. They've got the money. They've got the prospects. Why not?
Who would some of those prospects be that would have maybe the potential to bring back a top-notch player at the deadline, Keegan?
Now, top end of the system, you're looking at guys like Arjun Namala, Trey Yesavage, their big right-hander. That's only if they're swinging big, big, big. Now, if you're looking at our list, I think Aurelvis Martinez is still listed number 3. He's going to plummet down pretty soon. He's losing a lot of that stock. But the good news for the Blue Jays is that when you look down through whether it's Kendry Rojas, Cal Steven, Johnny King, Landon Marutis, they're finally having multiple success stories. The past few years for this farm system were bad, period. They were not good, too many injuries, not enough breakouts. It seems like all that karma is coming back around all in one year here, guys. And the top-end names like Namala's, like Yesavage, Johnny King, I think, is in that group for me right now, the young lefty. That's only if you're talking about a big franchise-changing move, a guy who's going to be around for a while. But what's encouraging if you're the Blue Jays is that they've built up the middle. The guys you'll see ranked between number 8, number 15, number 22, those guys are a lot better than they were a year ago. And if you're shopping for a reliever or a depth starter, those are the guys you'll be looking at. And there's also a lot of this fringe group that you've seen, Leo Jimenez, Will Robertson. The Jays have 5, 6, 7 additional big leaguers around this roster that they can move. So there's a lot of ways they can do this. And most importantly, guys, they have money. They have money this year. They have money beyond this year to certainly take on. And that puts them in a pretty small class of teams.
Fired up for tonight, man. It's been a blast seeing this team in action against the Yanks and hopefully another dub down at the Dome. You'll be covering it for MLB.com. He is Keegan Matheson. Thank you for the time. Enjoy the game.
You got it, fellas. We'll talk soon. Take care.
All right. Thank you, Keegan. Yeah, it's something. It's funny how the tide has turned in, at least amongst my group of friends who early on in the season, like, hey, when we go down to the Dome, see the Jays? They're like, absolutely not. I'd rather do anything else. Now, my buddies who apparently think I'm some kind of Blue Jays insider with tickets, hey, any chance you might be able to get tickets for tonight? And I'm like, no, what do I we work at Bell. This is not Rogers. We work at Bell. But the buzz is back. I mean, they have a sellout crowd, and you go down to the park, man, it's fun. It is fun. It's the improvements that they made to that ballpark with the renovations cannot be understated as far as how much better it is.
It's a great atmosphere.
It's so much better than it used to be.
Especially with the roof open.
Oh, yeah. I've not been down for an open roof game yet. But
there aren't many.
Looking forward to it. Yeah. Well, I mean, these days.
Slow start to the summer.
I mean, these days, every day it's 28 and sunny in Toronto right now. So soak it up tonight. Perfect night for a baseball game. Barrios versus Warren, 7:07 first pitch. We have Chris Johnston joining us in about 20 minutes. Some news on Pius Suter. Who is his number one suitor? We'll tell you about that, plus the latest on Nick Ehlers with CJ when he joins us in about 20 minutes. You're watching, you're listening, and on YouTube as well, OverDrive. This is TSN.
the script for the hell of it. Addicted to betrayal.
OverDrive brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. Korolnik and Feschuk on this Wednesday afternoon. Chris Johnston will join us in about 15 minutes. We'll get the latest from CJ on what's going on. Day 2 of NHL free agency, Dave. We know Pia Suter is now a St. Louis Blue, a 2-year deal, just $4 million. Pretty reasonable contract. For a third-line centerman.
Coming off a career year, 25 goals.
Not bad.
Good time to strike.
Oh, you think he would get paid more. There's a lot of teams out there with a ton of money to spend. How are they spending it? How is Columbus and San Jose? I guess Anaheim did bring in Granlund, which I think was a really good signing for them. $7 million a year for 3 years. I mean, you got to spend some cash if you're some of these teams, and I don't know how they're going to do it.
I mean, let's not get crazy here. Pia Suter, 25 goal a year, but his career high before that was 15.
Yeah.
He's not exactly, that productive. And you're right. It's a good contract, but it's reasonable, I think, in a rising cap environment with, as you point out, with many teams out there with money to spend. It makes sense why he didn't go back to Vancouver and why he went to the open market.
So more on that with Chris when he joins us again in about 15 minutes. The Raptors signing Jakob Poeltl, 4-year contract extension. Also signing a fella by the name of, and I wrote this out phonetically, Sandro Mamukelashvili. Mamukelashvili, a 2-year deal. He's like a big who could shoot threes. And that's the first Bobby Webster era Raptors maneuvering, right? The Poeltl extension.
Yeah.
Mamukelashvili, who is going to be a fan favorite. I've already ordered my jersey. It's a lot of letters.
Yeah.
Very expensive down at Real Sports.
That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10.
Mamukelashvili.
That's a 14-letterer.
That's a big one. That's a big one there for Sandro. But I don't know. It's going to be fun. I am intrigued by this Raptors team, and I have no idea what they're going to do with the president's role. And frankly, I was stunned that they're going to hire one at all. I mean, I thought the MLSE hierarchy was done with the president's role after Shanahan was out, but apparently Pelly and company view it differently with the Toronto Raptors. Any names that you're hearing around the Toronto sports scene when it comes to that role as a potential fit?
There's names you hear. I mean, obviously people throw out the name Bob Myers because he's the most...
I did throw that name out before the show.
He's the most accomplished executive on the market that isn't currently employed outside the media. He's working for ESPN right now, and of course he was a big part of that Golden State Warriors dynasty that won a handful of championships in the Steph Curry, Draymond Green, Klay Thompson era. But the thing with that is, if it's about streamlining and it's about economics to some degree, because I think everything is when it comes to these moves, Bob Myers probably would earn as much or more than the contract that they're now paying off on Masai Ujiri at $15 million base. So it seems a little rich for the Raptors' blood at this point in their franchise history.
Yeah, it does. I think you're spot on. And I have this sneaking suspicion that Webster just gets promoted. And I don't think that's a bad decision. And could he just hold both titles?
Yeah.
I guess. Why not?
Becomes GM. They elevate another guy.
Sure. And Webster essentially becomes the Ujiri. And, maybe Dan Tolzman slides into that GM role, however it might be.
However they structure.
Yeah, however they might structure. But Bobby Webster's still the top decision maker. And listen, this is a guy who's very well regarded, has worked with Ujiri. He was handpicked from the NBA front office to join the Raptors. And the succession plan was pretty clear from the outset with the Raptors and how much they liked Bobby Webster. I certainly wouldn't be opposed to that idea as someone who supports the Raps.
Except that, there was an extension given to various members of the front office, including Bobby Webster. That extension was only 1 year, so a year beyond this year. So he's only got 2 years on the book. So they don't love him that much, and that was Masai Ujiri fighting for him before he was,
that's true,
to leave the office.
Man, it is so peculiar just thinking about that Keith Pelly press conference, which happened on Friday afternoon, and I feel like a lot of the conversations after have been swept under the rug, and I guess leading it right into the Canada Day long weekend, and of course NHL free agency here in the city. We haven't talked a lot about it, but I thought it was a peculiar press conference. I really did, and the line of questioning about why the decision was made, there was no real answer.
Didn't answer the question.
Because we know the answer. It's a financial decision, but you're not going to come out and say it for obvious reasons. You don't want to come off as an organization that's not willing to spend to keep the best assets that you have, which Masai Ujiri certainly was just that. So
it's financial, AK,
it is financial.
And it's also personal. Let's face it here. Like, a big part of what we're seeing here is Larry Tannenbaum was essentially the kingmaker in the previous structure. Now that Edward Rogers is the king, it's a dictatorship, not a democracy anymore. He owns the shares, and no one doesn't have to answer to anybody. It's the guys that were tight with Larry, Brendan Shanahan, for instance, Masai Ujiri more than anyone. What do you know? They're not there anymore. Because
Fascinating times.
Larry doesn't have that influence anymore.
Yeah, and it's a Ed Rogers show now and Keith Pelly's show, and that was the decision they came to, and we'll see if they come to another decision when it comes to the next president of the Toronto Raptors. Chris Johnston coming up. We'll play OverDrive arbitration as well at 6:30 as we continue on TSN2, TSN 1050. We are live on TSN's YouTube channel.
This is OverDrive with Hayes, Noodles, and the O-Dog on TSN 1050.
Someone pour me up a double shot of whiskey. They know me and Jay Dale's got a history. There's a party downtown near 5th Street. Everybody at the bar getting tipsy.
The third hour of OverDrive. You're watching on TSN2, listening on TSN 1050, up on TSN's YouTube channel. I'm Aaron Korolnik, usually host a show called First Up from 6 to 10 a.m. here on TSN 1050. That's my friend Dave Feschuk from the Toronto Star, who does fantastic work. He's one of the preeminent columnists in our country.
Are there any left? I might be the only one.
Yeah, there's a couple left. There's a couple left. It's a dying breed, but do great work, Dave.
Thanks.
And on radio as well, of course. Chris Johnston also does great work as a hockey insider here at TSN. He's going to join us in a couple minutes. Still no word on Nikolai Ehlers, where he'll ultimately land, although the expectation is we will find out today. And it is a sad state of affairs if we're eagerly anticipating where Nick Ehlers lands. He's a really good player.
Yeah.
Really good player, but it's more of it just speaks to the quality or lack thereof of this group of free agents after Florida ruined everything.
Yeah, and we thought it was going to be Marner having the free agency tour.
It's Nick Ehlers.
It's Nick Ehlers, apparently.
It is.
It's holding things up here, like taking a long time to decide about where he wants to play his next hockey game.
Now, one of the deals that did surprise me came down late last night. Andrew Mangiapane signs a 2-year deal, $3.6 a year with Edmonton. And that did seem like something the Toronto Maple Leafs were going to be in on. And I do wonder how close the Leafs got on Mangiapane. And I think it's pretty clear the Leafs are looking for a top 6 forward still. Is he a top 6 forward, Mangiapane? Or maybe you look at him as, like, who's a better player, Mangiapane or Matias Michelli, who they traded for from Utah? Who do you think's the better player?
They're different players.
Yes.
They're different. They do different things.
They do.
Right? I mean, Michelli, obviously more of a playmaker, water bug kind of passer first. I mean, Mangiapane at his best is a 35-goal guy, right?
How long ago was that?
That was a while ago. That was 2022.
Oh, that wasn't that long ago.
But,
okay.
Still, I mean, he's averaged 20. He's averaged 20 through his career. So that's pretty good. I mean, he's obviously he's got ties to Brad Treliving, which is why a lot of people, I think, connected the dots and thought the Leafs would be in on Mangiapane. He's a Toronto guy. I was kind of surprised, too. I thought the Leafs would be in on that.
It makes sense for him. I mean, possibly saddle up next to 97 out there in Edmonton and have yourself a hell of a year. Or maybe Draisaitl, whoever it is.
I was going to say one or the other.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Although I think Jeff Skinner probably thought the same thing when he signed with Edmonton, and we saw how that worked out for him.
Yeah.
I don't think he's going to be getting the same type of contract he got last offseason, or Victor Arvidsson for that matter.
Yes.
It doesn't always work out like you hope, right? And I'm sure Mangiapane is looking at it and weighing his options, of which I'm sure were numerous. And he's like, all right, I can go play with McDavid for a couple of years, maybe win a Stanley Cup, maybe score 30. I mean, Zach Hyman scored how many goals next to McDavid on his line a couple of years ago?
Yeah.
So it was 70 goals, playoffs included. So clearly there's a path to which is very lucrative for Andrew Mangiapane. But I would imagine he was highly sought after on a 2-year term at less than $4 million.
Yeah.
He's a guy who could fit into almost every lineup, considering the rise in the salary cap. But chose Edmonton, and I can't fault him for that decision.
Well, I mean, look, they needed guys. There's opportunity there.
Desperately.
Right?
They need depth up front to the Edmonton Oilers. They lost a lot of guys to free agency.
Yeah, and to your point, like it's not a bad kind of scenario where you say, well, you might play with McDavid, and if you don't, you play with Draisaitl, and guess what? They've got holes to plug, and you can fill one. And that's a good place to be for Andrew Mangiapane, and I think that explains why he's going where he's going. But Edmonton's still got more work to do.
Oh, yeah. Like, how many guys would they have lost? Arvidsson, they lost
Connor
Perry,
Brown.
they lost Connor Brown. I mean,
It's
it is a long list, and it's going to be a challenge to fill it. And Vander Kane would be another example.
Yes.
He gets traded to the Vancouver Canucks, and for Edmonton, like, their depth carried them. And remember, it was a stretch of time where it wasn't McDavid and Draisaitl scoring all those goals. It was Matthias Janmark and Kane was carrying them, and Connor Brown was scoring goals, and Arvidsson scored a big goal for the Oilers, and then all that dried up. Remember, Skinner scored somehow for the Oilers too,
and the Panthers showed it too, right? Like you've got to have that kind of depth where on any given night it might not have to be your big guys carrying you. If you want to have one of those incredible long playoff runs that takes you right to to the end of the thing. It's got to happen sometimes. You've just got to have those guys. And very few teams have the luxury of that depth.
There is no team that has the luxury of the same depth that the Florida Panthers have. And I am kind of surprised at some of the narratives surrounding, like, don't even play next season. The Panthers have already won. Like, I mean, I think that's a little bit of a stretch. Again, all it takes is, and you mentioned it earlier, Bobrovsky tweaking something, and I'm not cheering for that, but it's just a reality of the sport where
they have no insurance for Bobrovsky.
How dare you disrespect Daniil Tarasov like that, Dave? Come on. But no, you're right. You're right, of course. And you know that these guys have endured a lot physically over the last couple of years. So we'll see. They still got to play the season. And we are eagerly anticipating the landing spot for one Nick Ehlers, and we have a man on the line who might have the answer for us. He is our hockey insider, Chris Johnston. CJ, Nick Ehlers, what's going on, my man?
Well, I don't know. I don't have a fresh update for you. I mean, I was told earlier in the day that his intention was to sign a contract today to make his decision. But it's getting pretty late in Denmark right now, and so I'm not saying he's not going to. I just don't have fresh up to the moment whether it's going to happen. But obviously, you know, he was in a pretty unique position, I'd say, with most of the top names being out of the mix by the time it got to July 1st. You know, players had either signed or we had the Marner sign and trade. Even Brock Boeser took himself off the market. I mean, Nikolai Ehlers was in a position where he could take his time, and that's what he did. I know he spent the last day and a half here having conversations with people from the organizations that were interested in his services. And what's unique about that is he actually gets time to think about where he's going, which is not something a lot of players can say that signed July 1st or July 2nd in the NHL. I mean, as much as you prepare for it, I think the day is pretty hectic. And, you know, you just got to dive right in and make a call quickly. And he's actually getting a little bit of, you know, sober second thought, I'll call it, to really make the best informed decision he can for his future.
Chris, Dave and I were talking about Andrew Mangiapane signing a 2-year deal, $3.6 a year with the Edmonton Oilers. Was that a player that you believe the Toronto Maple Leafs were pursuing?
They definitely had interest, you know, and there were some teams yesterday I know that thought he was actually going to Toronto. But, you know, ultimately, obviously, Edmonton managed to land him. And I think he's a sneaky good signing for the Oilers in this free agent market in a year where, you know, there weren't really game breakers didn't end up being available to teams. You know, we're really looking at kind of a secondary market. But, you know, when you look at Mangiapane's underlying numbers, and I think his potential to pop if he gets, you know, some meaningful time beside Connor McDavid and or Leon Draisaitl, I mean, $3.6 million in the current environment, you know, could look like a pretty good steal for them. So, you know, the Leafs certainly, I think we're looking at all the options. You know, they like Nikolai Ehlers too. I just don't know that Ehlers wanted to jump into a hockey market quite like this one as part of the next phase of his career. And so, you know, I do believe, you know, at this stage we can say pretty confidently that whatever the Leafs do to address the holes at the top of the forward lineup will have to be done by trade, or maybe just be done in time. It doesn't mean the trade's happening tomorrow. It might be something that is a longer-term project, you know, sometime before the trade deadline next season.
On the subject of trades, with regards to the Toronto Maple Leafs, there has been some buzz about reported interest in Nazem Kadri. Of course, was a Toronto Maple Leafs, was actually signed by Brad Treliving to the current deal he's on with the Flames. What can you tell us about that possibility?
I can tell you that I have no reason to believe that there's anything cooking there. You know, I don't think that that's something. It's not to say it can't happen down the road. You know, it's not to say that there isn't some interest. I just don't think the Calgary Flames are in a position where that sort of trade is happening in the near future here. So, you know, the truth is I get that everyone wants to identify these trade targets for the Leafs. I don't know that even they know who they are at this point in time. I mean, this is a pretty unique summer around the NHL. A lot of the players we expected to be traded kind of in this window around the draft period did get moved. But now, you know, I just wonder how the trade market develops. I think it's going to be more robust than it's been in years gone by. You know, half the league, frankly, puts up a gone fishing sign by the 4th of July in the NHL. I don't think that's going to be something that can be afforded to too many front offices at this stage. And so, you know, I think it's going to be the way that the Leafs front office found it to be a grind to get through some of those contract negotiations before signing the deals. with Tavares and Nyes and getting to where they are now. I think it's still going to be a grind to fill out this roster. But, they are armed with a bit of cap space. I think they have players that can be moved elsewhere to maybe even create more cap space if they need it. And so, I at this point in time, I don't think the Kadri rumors, or I don't even know where they're coming from, to be honest. It's hard to keep track these days. So much stuff flies around social media, but I just don't have any reason to believe there's any legs to that at this stage.
Yeah, fair enough, CJ. But I mean, you can see the sort of the germination of that idea because, this was a summer where the idea was, hey, they might take a run at Sam Bennett. Well, no, Sam Bennett's signed. They might take a run at Brad Marchand. No, Marchand signed back in Florida. There's this idea that they need a player with those types of characteristics, those playoff bona fides and the ability to rise to the occasion and be a guy that can play in the pit of the cauldron of the Stanley Cup playoffs. And Kadri obviously has done that. He's got his cup in Colorado. Can you think of other guys who might be on the market who fit that bill? Because there's not exactly, a long list of guys who have those types of career resume credentials.
Well, I could think of guys that fit the criteria you're laying out there, Dave. I don't know who's available, though, because right now there's not enough teams trying to be bad in the NHL. It's just a fact. I mean, Pittsburgh is the only team that I would say is like actively rebuilding at this stage. Now, I realize you have teams like Chicago and San Jose that have been at the bottom of the league for multiple years and, may still not yet be ready to even jump anywhere near playoff contention. But those teams are not looking to shed themselves of useful players. They're trying to find more of them, right now so they can make that climb. And so, that's definitely a challenge. I can understand where the Kadri fascination comes from, but to hear you lay it out, honestly, I just feel like what irony that the way you're speaking about it, because it was obviously the things that happened in the playoffs, specifically with Nazem Kadri, the 2 suspensions he had in Toronto against those back-to-back series against Boston. I mean, that's the reason he was traded to begin with. He wasn't dealt out of town because he had a bad contract. In fact, he was on a very team-friendly contract at that point in time. He wasn't dealt out of town because he didn't produce in the regular season. He was putting up the exact kind of numbers you expected. It was because they felt they couldn't trust him in the playoffs. And now, there could be a world where people are saying, well, you got to bring this guy back because of what he can do in the playoffs. I mean, it's just funny how these things come around. But, I will never rule it out as a long-term possibility because, we all know the affinity that Naz had for playing in Toronto. He really relished, quite honestly, I think, being a first-round pick of the Leafs, being a local guy, being in the eye of the hurricane. He didn't mind even sometimes when controversy swirled around him. I always felt like he handled that pretty well. He didn't shy away from it. He was, I think he was able to handle the market. So, that if there was a world where the Flames are ever truly putting him on the market, I think the Leafs would be there. But I just don't think we exist in that reality right now.
TSN hockey insider Chris Johnston, our guest. This is hour 3 of Overdrive. The latest on Bowen Byram is what? Because there's been talks about a trade, an offer sheet. I mean, a lot of speculation surrounding the Sabres defenseman. What's the latest on that one?
Well, I mean, it's getting interesting, I'd say, because, obviously there is legitimate offer sheet whispers out there for Byram. I do think he's a player that teams are looking to see if they could, structure one of those in a way that would, help extract him from Buffalo, because that's ultimately the point of an offer sheet, right? I mean, I know that we sometimes think, you can cripple another team, make them make a bad decision, but ultimately you're trying to get the player, and there's a ton of interest in Bowen Byram, the player. But you had Kevin Adams, meeting the reporters in Buffalo this morning and talking about how they're going to match any offer sheet that he gets. And so it's a bit of a stalemate. It's getting somewhat public, and the pressure goes up under those circumstances. So, the Sabres are more than willing to trade Byram. I think the biggest issue they've encountered is getting someone back who can help them in real time. I don't think they want to make a futures deal. It's the same reason they wouldn't want to let him walk as an offer sheet candidate if he actually does sign one, because they'd be getting draft picks in that case. And I don't think that at this stage of where the Sabres are at, the draft picks hold much appeal for them. I mean, they've drafted far too often, far too high in the last 14 years and still haven't been able to get back to the playoffs. So they need actual players. And so they haven't found the fit to make that kind of trade, but I do believe they'll still stay at it. And, you have a team like the Calgary Flames who's, entertained some trade talks on Rasmus Anderson. I think it could make sense in a world if the Flames can find a way to move Anderson, that they're doing it in concert with making a trade to get someone like Bowen Byram and signing him. The interest goes beyond that with Byram too. So, this, as I said, I do think this is going to be a newsier summer than usual in the NHL, and it's only going to be a few of us left here to talk about it while the rest of the gang are up at the cottage.
Well, boo-hoo for us, CJ, but it could be fun, man. But let me ask you this one, CJ. What you watched with rapt attention last night as OverDrive was ending with Mitch Marner taking the stage in Las Vegas for his introductory press conference down there. I wanted to get your reaction. I mean, are you hearing buzz? What is the fallout in terms of the Leafs dressing room to see, one of the core four, one of the linchpins of this Maple Leafs team over the last decade in another uniform?
Well, I think it's fascinating myself. And my view, and I was sitting, 5-hour flight away here back in Toronto, just watching it all, the press availability. But I mean, man, to me, Mitch Marner looked, like he had the weight of the world lifted off his shoulders. I mean, pretty excited, obviously, for this next chapter in his life. He's become a father here in the last few months. I think he sees this as truly a turn the page kind of moment for him and his family. And he's joining a team that, basically its entire existence has been truly going all in to win every season. And I think as a player, what more can you ask? He's doing it also while being paid as alongside Mikko Rantanen as the highest paid wingers in the league at $12 million a year. So, it's a total home run for Mitch Marner. Time will tell if it's a home run for the Golden Knights, but I know they certainly loved the first impression they had of him yesterday. And, where it leaves us all here in Toronto is, I'm not too sure. I mean, I think that most of us would agree that have been close to this team, like we have, the three of us, this is probably overdue, that more than once have we either talked about or written about the need maybe to consider something other than the strategy the team had, embarked on with the building the team around, 4 highly paid players. And now, in turn, it ends up getting forced on them that Marner leaves. It was his decision and clearly, and, he left for, Nicholas Waugh is a useful player for the Leafs. He's obviously not in the same class as Mitch Marner. And so now it gets spicy just in terms of what the Leafs can do to move on, because Marner's he's a diminutive guy, but he leaves a massive hole in the lineup, right? Like where do you find someone who is a top penalty killer, who is on your first line producing 100 points, who's obviously a power play wizard, played 3-on-3 for them when they get to overtime. I mean, he truly is one of the most useful forwards in the league at that. I recognize his shortcomings. I recognize that the playoff production wasn't there, and I can understand why you get to this point in time, but there's no replacing that with one or even 2 players, I don't think. But that's the challenge that Brad Treliving now faces.
Yeah, and clearly a guy like Austin Matthews is going to have to step up with Marner gone. His line mate, a guy who scored 69 goals just a couple of years ago, had a down year. Is there any reason to believe that Matthews' health is compromised at all heading into the offseason, or the expectation is 100% full go come September?
That's the expectation. I've heard nothing to suggest to the contrary. And last year that was the way when he returned, that was the way he felt. It was something he tweaked during training camp that led to this season being what it was in terms of, the time he missed during the year, the trip to Germany, and never got back to what was 100%. So, he's obviously had some degree of injury history, as a lot of players do when they get 9 or 10 years into a pro career. And so, I can't say how that's going to go, because a lot of it will be what happens. But certainly there's no reason to sense to anticipate that there will be those limitations. I think he's full go in terms of his training and expects to be healthy next season. And obviously is going to be looking to have a bigger year personally, because, that's going to be required of him, I think, in a world without Marner.
Marner kind of made some allusions to talking to teammates on the Leafs, CJ, about Vegas, guys who played for the Golden Knights Ryan Reeves, Max Pacioretty, and how they were essentially giving him good reviews of life in the Nevada desert. How do you think that goes over in Leafland, that these guys are talking up a potential landing spot for one of the prize free agents in Maple Leafs history?
Yeah, I think it felt a little bit like saying the quiet part out loud. I'm not surprised to hear those kind of conversations happen. Frankly, they happen in our business. I've been in a position where I've been thinking about leaving a job, and you talk to other people, what's it like over there? What's the environment like? I do think it's a normal conversation to have, but they may not appreciate that becoming public knowledge. And look, it was Mitch Marner's right to go live and play where he wanted to play. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And what would you do if a colleague asked you about something and you had some experience? I mean, it's probably not going to sit too well, but on the list, when the dust settles, I also don't think it's all that serious. And this league is a small town, and everybody kind of knows each other, and those sort of conversations I think are pretty typical. It's just not that don't always hear someone mention that he had those conversations when he's behind a microphone. Right,
and the small townness of the NHL leads to the fact you don't always hear people complaining about tampering. There was some suggestion the Leafs might raise a stink about tampering here. CJ, what are you hearing on that front?
From the league end of things, it doesn't sound like they have any concern. Now, obviously, if they're presented with new information or some kind of proof of something, I guess that could change. But I do think the fact that ultimately a trade happens, it just feels like it's not going to happen. And look, it's shaky ground. I mean, there's definitely a lot of gray involved with tampering. I think that to prove tampering, you really need a paper trail. I think in this case, it just felt like the team in this case being the Golden Knights wanted Marner, and that Marner wanted to go to them. But the Leafs also engaged in trade talks with the Golden Knights too. And so I don't know how that would ever be adjudicated. My belief is it will probably go down as part of just another layer of this overall story. But I'd be surprised if it resulted in any sort of punishment or anything of that nature. And I don't have any reason to believe the Leafs are even pursuing that. I think some of this is just conjecture, and it comes out of the emotion of everything going on as well. So, perhaps I'm wrong on that, but my sense is this will probably fade into the background now that the dust has settled on the whole Marner era.
Chris, you're the man. I know a lot of our analysts and insiders have headed up north or in Muskoka or the Kawarthas or wherever, but you're still here grinding away ahead of, day 2 of NHL free agency. And thanks for coming on the show today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm adjudicating the Pius Suter sweepstakes.
Nice.
He's going to St. Louis. So
yes,
exciting. There
you go. Exciting stuff. Thanks, buddy.
See you guys.
All right, that's Chris Johnston, TSN Hockey Insider. I do think, with regards to the Leafs, almost as fascinating for me as who they look to pursue as a top 6 forward is how they conjure up the assets to acquire said top 6 forward. Let's just say Calgary calls Toronto and says, hey, Nazem Kadri wants to come, and this is all theoretical, wants to come back to Toronto. We want to trade Kadri back to Toronto. What are the Leafs? The Leafs have no draft pick, so forget that. Prospect-wise, they have Easton Cowan, who I don't think they want to trade. Even for a 34-year-old making $7 million a year, maybe not. They have a really strong defense. You're not trading Tanev or McCabe. Morgan Riley, I think you wouldn't be opposed to trading, frankly.
He's got a lot to say about that. Everything to say.
He has a no move. Brandon Carlo has, I believe, an 8-team list.
He's tradable, which is why he's coming up in these conversations.
That is my prediction.
Yeah.
Is that the Leafs ultimately, I don't think they want to trade Brandon Carlo. They traded a lot to get Brandon Carlo.
Yes, and they'll be looking for a Brandon Carlo replacement the minute they trade him.
That is true. They don't have a 6'5", 6'6" right shot defenseman who's too physically imposing like a Brandon Carlo. I just don't.
Think about
I don't know how else you get anybody. If you're not going to trade Cowan, you're not going to trade Carlo. You don't have any draft picks. How do you get an impact player? It's impossible.
Well, I got news for you. You got to trade Easton Cowan, and you might have to trade Carlo because you're right. I mean, and the question is, you don't want to trade a 20-year-old who burned up the CHL like Easton Cowan did because he's obviously got a great career ahead of him. But you might have to. You're not talking about a timeline of a 20-year-old here. You're talking about a timeline of a team who's well past due meeting their potential, and they may never meet their potential if you do not put the pieces in place to maximize their chances this season.
Yeah, and I think that is one of the most fascinating questions facing Brad Treliving. Don't think he wants to do it. And again, look at what they just gave up to bring in Brandon Carlo. First-round pick and their second-best prospect in Fraser Minton. And I think there are probably people who viewed Minton in a similar light to that of Cowan at the trade deadline last year. So, Minton might be playing for Boston next year. That wouldn't surprise me at all. So. No. It's a tough spot they find themselves in, but they have, again, you think back to the Scott Lawton trade. I love Scott Lawton. He makes $1.5 million. If you have Nick Watt now, Lawton's your fourth-line center. You just gave up a first-round pick and one of your best prospects in Nikita Grabenkin, who varying degrees of people who believe in Grabenkin as a legit NHL player going forward here, but
wow,
you would like to have that first-round pick back, that's for sure at this point in time.
Well, how many first-round picks would you like to have back in all these win-now transactions?
Nick Foligno's first-round pick.
Exactly.
Ryan O'Reilly's first-round pick.
No, Ryan O'Reilly at least showed up and actually won a playoff series.
He did.
So that was at least win one series now. It wasn't win anything significant now, but there have been a lot of win-now transactions that led to losing now.
That's exactly it. And that's something they're going to have to juggle, right? Trying to look at this hockey club in the years to come with Easton Cowan, who could be an NHL player next year for the Leafs.
Well,
again, that's something that we don't talk about enough. Oh, use Easton Cowan as an asset, yada, yada, yada. What if Easton Cowan can play in your top six next year?
That would be.
Is that impossible?
No, it's not impossible.
So maybe that's your answer. And then, I don't know, that's something that they've got to figure out. But it's a dilemma, a conundrum, some may say, for Brad Treliving and the Leafs.
Yeah, and they created it through many, many years of bad decisions and doubling and tripling and quadrupling down on the same team and the same concept, and here we are. But, blame Brendan Shanahan, blame Kyle Dubas, blame any number of people that aren't here anymore, but it's Brad Treliving's problem now to figure out.
Jays Yankees in about 40 minutes from down at the Dome. It will be Jose Barrios against Will Warren. We still have OverDrive arbitration to come, plus my FanDuel best bets on this Wednesday afternoon here on TSN2, TSN 1050, and TSN's YouTube channel.
Now, is that going to be a problem?
Yeah, it's going to be a problem. It's going to be a problem for them. It's outrageous, egregious, preposterous.
OverDrive, arbitration.
I've been wanting a piece of them for years.
You think we got a case?
Your face is my case.
All right, it's time for OverDrive arbitration. We're back here. It's hour 3. Aaron Korolnik, Dave Feschuk from the Toronto Star. You know how this game works, Dave. We present a scenario, and it's a take it or leave it situation. And we're going to start with Austin Matthews. Amanda, we've discussed a lot this afternoon in lieu of his partner in crime, Mitch Marner, departing for the bright lights of Las Vegas. Austin Matthews is awarded 50 goals next season. Do you take it or do you leave it?
Oh, I take it. I take it. Coming off a 33-goal, injury-plagued slump of a year, yeah, I take it, especially since...
How many guys scored 50 this year? One? Leon Draisaitl being the only one?
Willie was right there on his
Let's say, okay, I think 50 might be a stretch. How about 44? Would you take 44 if you were Austin Matthews?
What are we changing the number here? What kind of an arbitration case is this?
We're changing it on the fly.
Look, I mean, the bottom line is with Austin Matthews, I would take 44 in the regular season. It's better than 33.
It is.
But here's the thing, though. It really doesn't matter to me. I want more than... What did he have in the playoffs? Is that a 3? Yes, 3 goals in the playoffs, AK. I want more than the 3 goals in the playoffs next year. Is that possible?
It is very possible.
Throw in an extra more than 3 goals in the playoffs, then I'll take.
I think you would take that. I think you would take 5, 6, 7, maybe 10 goals in the Stanley Cup playoffs for Austin Matthews. Yes, I too would take 50, but Austin Matthews, his production this year, the scrutiny on him is going to be unlike any other season in which he's played for the Toronto Maple Leafs for obvious reasons. Like, I think Matthew Nyes will be playing with Austin Matthews. I don't know who's going to be on the other side, but think about the collection of talent that Austin Matthews has been afforded over the last half decade plus now with Mitch Marner, one of the preeminent right wingers in the National Hockey League, one of the great point producers in the regular season that this league has. And now he's gone. And who's replacing him on his wing? Is it Matias Michelli?
Yeah.
Is it Max Domi? Maybe it's William Nylander. In that case, I think Matthews would be thrilled, but then you'd essentially have nothing as far as your second, third, fourth lines with offense.
That's a concern.
It would be a major concern. My guess is Matthews and Nylander on separate lines. So,
well,
it's not like he doesn't have the ability to produce a ton of offense with or without Mitch Marner, but he's going to be a guy who's facing a lot more pressure this year than in past years, Dave.
Well, look, I mean, there's been plenty of time during his career where they didn't play together. Mike Babcock wouldn't play Marner and Matthews together, and they both did okay.
Yep.
But yeah, it's bottom line is the regular season numbers, AK. I think we've all come to realize
there's no concern for you that the Toronto Maple Leafs in question to make the postseason next year.
Well, I guess if Matthews gets 33 goals again,
yeah, it's like I look at this team and I'm the furthest thing from rooting for it, but they are one injury away from one of their big players from looking like a pretty bad offensive team, and that's Matthews or Nylander.
Yeah,
they need those guys to be healthy, and they need those guys to be producing, because if they aren't, like if you have a season where Austin Matthews is missing 30 games next year, good luck finding offense there.
That's a problem.
Like,
yeah,
again, that's the luxury that the Leafs have had over the years with Marner, with Matthews, with Nylander, and they have been so good without those guys in the lineup. Morgan Riley, too. Like, you look at the Maple Leafs records without some of these guys in the regular season, without some of these guys, they're staggering records. It almost doesn't make sense how they've been so good. It's because they can kind of pick up the slack for one another when they're out. But, Marner departing, and maybe the Leafs still have Tree Living still has an ace up his sleeve and can find somebody else to produce a lot of offense. But that's a concern. And perhaps one of those guys is Matthew Nyes. He is the next subject in OverDrive arbitration, awarded 60 points with the Maple Leafs next season. Are you taking that?
I'm going to leave that, AK. That's not going to be good enough for me.
Wow.
It's not going to be good enough for me.
Really?
No. I mean,
high expectations.
With a nice big new contract comes high expectations, AK. I mean, this guy, he's coming off a 58-point year, but I look at that as the ground floor. I don't look at that as the standard. I look at that as the jumping off point for a guy who has to be more productive. If this team is going to be better than it's been without Mitch Marner and with the changes it's being forced to make this offseason, guess what? Matthew Knies has got to be a big part of that, and he's got to become the player they hope he can be. They didn't pay him thinking 58 points this season was his ground floor. I think they paid him thinking this guy can get 60, 70, 80, 90 points.
Yeah, and I do think it's within the realm of possibility that could happen, and that Matthew Knies is going to be playing on the top power play unit. He's going to be standing there net front. He's going to be playing with, we believe, Austin Matthews all year long. And if you're doing that, you should be racking up the points. And will the Leafs power play be as good this coming season as it has been in the last number of years with Marner out there? Maybe, maybe not, but it'll still be pretty good. I mean,
you'd
it's
have
not
to think.
It'll still be good, and we don't know who'll be playing the point. I would assume Morgan Riley's probably your power play quarterback again. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there rolling their eyes like, again, seriously, we're going back to that. But at least power play was pretty good, like a top 5 power play for a large majority of those years with Morgan Riley as the PPQB. So
yeah, that gets overlooked. I mean, they did have some
I would
great
guess
numbers.
that'll happen. Yeah, they did. Now in the playoffs, it was garbage, but
yeah,
a lot of stuff was garbage come postseason for the Toronto Maple Leafs. All right, I think I would take the 60 points personally for Matthew Knies.
Would you?
But yeah,
That's
I think
a good.
so.
That's
I think
a
so.
good
It's a good number. It's a good number.
Okay,
it's fine.
Two more than he got this year.
Yeah,
after giving him all that money.
But I could see a situation in which he, destroys that number.
Well, that's what you're hoping for.
I think so. And again, everyone's got to pick up the slack a little bit as far as point production for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Mateus Michelli might be playing on this top power play when it's all said and done. That's a possibility.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit scary. Did have 57 points a couple years ago, but we'll have to see what the Leafs ultimately do. All right, so Chad Kelly of the Toronto Argonauts, who was ruled out today, he's not starting on Friday against Hamilton down at BMO Field, is awarded 5 starts with the Argonauts. Take it or leave it. Let me jump in here. You got to leave that. 5 starts. Now, he hasn't played yet this year. He's not playing this week. 4
games into it.
They're 4, so he's not going to play this week, so that's 5. Then they have their bye. And you heard Ryan Dinwiddie talk on my show First Up with regards to Kelly and a little bit of uncertainty. But he's coming back from that broken leg he suffered against Montreal in the playoffs. He was dealing with an ingrown toenail as well in camp. That kind of set back his progress.
Oof.
But 5 starts?
Okay, so
that's a small number. I would be leaving that for sure.
You've got 13 games to go after this week. So what's a reasonable number here? It doesn't sound particularly promising.
Maybe 9. I'll take 9 starts.
Almost
Chad
double.
Kelly. I guess the question is, eventually they'll get Kelly back, but this is a guy who hasn't played in a very long time and is coming off a very serious injury after a season in which he suffered a pretty dramatic drop-off from his most outstanding player season in 2023. So my expectations for Chad Kelly are not overly high. Do I think he's better than Nick Arbuckle, who's currently starting for the Argos? I do, but I don't think you're seeing Chad coming in here and is the best player in the league like he was a couple of years ago.
So he's not the savior, is what you're saying.
I think that would be a little bit unrealistic to expect from Chad Kelly.
Well,
I think he will improve the Argos for sure, but I don't think he's coming in and just carrying this team to victories. They have a lot of holes, and this game on Friday night is a very important one for both Hamilton and Toronto, who are vying to keep pace with the Montreal Alouettes in the East.
I mean, 3 teams in the East with 1 win apiece, and the Alouettes at 3-1. Ugly stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty ugly. But, Hamilton comes to town. Who knows what could happen for the Toronto Argonauts. All right, so let's talk about the Edmonton Oilers. They are awarded a short-term deal with Connor McDavid, but he does not finish his career with the team. Do you take that or do you leave that? And let's, for these purposes, say the short-term deal is what, a 3 or 4 year
4-year
term?
deal?
Yeah, let's say so.
You know what? I'd take it. I'd take it. I mean, if he's going to leave eventually, almost everybody leaves eventually, right? The number of guys who play their whole career with one franchise. I mean, we're going to have the question. Hayes is going to be agitating for Sidney Crosby to leave Pittsburgh now that, as CJ pointed out, they're the only team in the league that is transparently rebuilding. Sidney Crosby's going to be tempted to wear another uniform before his career is over.
You would think
in
so.
a very big way here with Kyle Dubas having the Pittsburgh Penguins in shambles. So it's the likelihood of you playing the whole career in one place is very low. If you can get 4 more good years out of the best player in the league,
His total apex right there. As far
you've already
as
got 10.
goes.
Yep. You'll have 14 years. No, 15, because it would be a 4-year contract extension beyond this coming season. So So he'd essentially be 15 years in Edmonton if he gets a 4-year deal from here, right? I mean, how could you not take that? I mean, I guess what's the alternative? Is the alternative he gets 8 more years and he never leaves?
Yes.
Yeah.
Which could happen, I suppose. I would imagine. I mean, Marner, no one thought he was going to take 8 years.
Here's why I like the idea of the 4-year deal, though, if I'm a fan. It puts pressure. It's not LeBron taking 1-year deals.
He could do that too if he wanted to.
You could flex that muscle at the apex of your power as the best player in the league and say, I want to see what management is up to here. I want to make sure you were putting me in a position to succeed every single year. I want to make sure you are maximizing the potential of this team every single year. Okay, 4-year deal is not a 1-year deal. It's LeBron and McDavid. They're not the same thing. But I do think it's better than just saying 8-year deal just says whatever happens, happens. I want to be here. 4-year deal at least exerts a little bit of pressure that there is a ticking clock that you got to make this happen.
I understand the notion that you're espousing there, Dave, but I would also say, if you're Connor McDavid, you could easily just threaten, oh, you got to trade me. I don't want to be here anymore. I think that the pressure is always going to be there with today's athletes simply because of the player empowerment and how they exert control over their futures in a way that we've never seen in sports ever in the history. So, yeah, if McDavid wanted out of Edmonton, he can still sign an 8-year deal after 2 years in the summertime. He's like, listen, I'm not coming back unless you do this or that. So I'm not sure how much.
Yeah, but that can get ugly.
It could definitely get ugly. Yeah. That's not how hockey players operate.
I mean, the president of the team's his former agent.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying that's something that he should do or will do. But
that's why the deal is.
The pressure's there.
That's what I mean. But the deal puts this built-in pressure without having to go to those lengths of, I'm just going to be that guy.
Fair. The Raptors, they are awarded a play-in tournament spot next season. Do you take that or leave it?
I'm going to quote the departed president, Masai Ujiri.
F. Brooklyn?
No, play in for what? As Masai once said. Play in for what? I'm not interested in the play-in. If I'm a play-in team, I'd rather be a lottery team because you need more talent. As Bobby Webster, the GM of the team, just said after the draft, they're still in talent acquisition mode, okay? They may not be rebuilding anymore as they were last year, kind of weirdly, because they had all these players under contract for big money. But they're in talent acquisition mode, man. Like, if they can get one more, if they have a bad year next year, something really bad happens, and they're on that kind of fringe of being a play-in team or a lottery team, I'll take the lottery.
The Raptors are a team that I just have no idea what they're going to look like when the season actually starts because none of these guys have played together.
Exactly.
It's never happened. Brandon Ingram's never played for the Toronto Raptors. Emmanuel Quigley's barely played for the Toronto Raptors. So I have no clue what they're all going to look like with regards to as far with their relationships on the court. And you could just think about, well, this guy can shoot and this guy can do this and this guy can do that. That's great. But until you actually see it in practice, I don't know. I don't know. And that's a huge gamble because they are committing some serious cash to all these guys. Jakob Poeltl's got a 4-year extension, $26 million per. We know Barrett's making 30 plus. We know Ingram's making 30 plus.
Quickly's
we know Barnes. They're all making 30-something million dollars. And none of them have accomplished anything.
No.
Zero. So
there's a lot of people that look at this team.
Like it's crazy. It's crazy to think, a play-in spot. I mean, like they got to be creeping up on that second apron, the luxury tax, like the amount of money they're spending for a team that is just like a big maybe is a risky proposition. And this kind of goes back to what we were talking about before the show, sitting in the green room, if you want to call it that, Dave. It's NBA ownership right now, and you're seeing some of the biggest franchises in the league's history being sold, the Celtics and the Lakers amongst them. Like if I'm MLSE and I'm staring at the cap sheet for the Raptors and looking at it, and all these guys are making $30 million.
Yeah,
really? Like that's what we're shoving out for them for what?
Yeah, but on the other, no, you're right. Like the Celtics sold. All those stories around the Celtics was essentially the reason the Grousbeck family sold out of their big stake was that they won the championship and the place barely turned a profit. Like
are the Raptors making money?
I mean, the money is in the accruing of the franchise value,
which I would be curious to know how much longer it continues to go up.
Well, they just had a record sale. Like when the Lakers sold for a valuation of $10 billion, guess what? Everybody else's valuation skyrocketed.
That is true.
So look, I've been on a lot of these shows over the years where everybody said it must be at the peak, right? We must be at the peak of franchise values, and they just keep going up, AK. And guess what? They're going to bring in 2 expansion teams, and whoever
everyone gets cash from that, right?
Yeah.
And the players,
not
don't
the
get
players, but
what
the
is it,
owners.
$300 million a team, $400 million a team?
More than that now, I think.
Oh, must be nice.
A lot more than that.
All right.
I mean, I think it's. You think about it. If you're going Vegas, Seattle, I mean, those are going to be expensive propositions.
Very much so. All right, last one. The Toronto Blue Jays in action tonight. Game 3 of the 4-game set against the Yanks are awarded the 3rd wild card spot in the American League. Do you take it or do you leave it?
Look, I think I take it. I mean, they can do better than that. They should win the East, right?
They could very well win the American League.
Right now, on a night when they're about to go to bat against the Yankees with a chance to pull even with the Yankees at the top of the AL East. I mean, optimism's at its height right now in Blue Jay land, right? As it should be, because they're coming off a huge win yesterday, the George Springer Grand Slam. You know, you'd want to shoot for the moon here and win the division, you know, for the first time in how long, right? I mean, and do that, but
the Anthopoulos Blue Jays, remember when they won it on the road and Anthopoulos was celebrating in the crowd? Right. Where was that? In like Cincinnati or something like that?
Yeah, I forget.
It was somewhere on the road, yeah.
You're jogging my memory on that, but you're right. But yeah, I mean, you'd love to win the division, but the bottom line is it doesn't really matter how you get in, as long as you get in. So I'd take it. Yeah,
I would probably take it too, because there's no guarantees.
No.
Just a couple of injuries, and there's a bunch of teams in the American League that are hovering around 500. All it takes is a 5-game losing streak, and you're back to square one. You lock yourself into a playoff spot. You play the number 2 seed or the number 1 seed, excuse me, in the wild card, and you go from there.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah. Like let's face it, they're hot now. They've also been cold this season.
They have, but they're getting guys back. No Bichette tonight, but seems like he's getting close to returning, and of course Santander.
May never see him.
Yeah, Santander, I don't know what's going on with that one. But
that one sounds weird. Keegan had some interesting...
What was it? Subluxation was the term? Yeah, you don't like that.
Keegan kind of had his eyebrow raised at what's going on there.
Yeah, you don't like that. It's a big piece to that order because he's got a lot of power. And if he can find it, that'd be a huge boost for the Jays. But it's kind of starting to seem like perhaps a lost season for Anthony Santander. I'll give you my best bets, powered by FanDuel on the other side, for Jays and Yankees to wrap up a jam-packed edition of OverDrive on this Wednesday afternoon.
Now, back to Overdrive with Hayes, Noodles, and the O-Dog.
All right, time now for today's best bets. They are powered by FanDuel. Make your picks and assemble a same-game parlay in seconds on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Doogie has been grinding away at the FanDuel Sportsbook app, as he is wont to do. And he has conjured up this three-leg SGP for tonight's Jays and Yankees game. Starts with George Springer to record a hit. Andres Jimenez, who is leading off tonight, to record a hit. And Aaron Judge, 2+ total bases, plus 240 on FanDuel. Today's best bets are powered by FanDuel. The first inning means as much as the ninth. When you bet on baseball on the FanDuel Sportsbook app, please play responsibly. 18+, physically located in Ontario. Pretty much a perfect night to be at a Jays game. Dome is open. Sun is shining. The beers are cold. That is perfection.
Gotta love it. Gotta love being at the ballpark on a nice summer night. I guess they had the dome closed until just recently, and now it just started to open, so crisis averted.
Probably some big cheers. Like, people were probably sitting there in the dome like, what is going on? Why is it closed? Although I will say, I was at an Argos game a couple weeks ago, and we were on the sideline where the sun was just beating us down for hours on end, and it was very unpleasant.
Really?
I had a rather bad sunburn.
You had heat problems?
Still applied sunscreen, of course. But, when you're sitting in the sun nonstop and watching the Argos just, lay an ugly one against Calgary, it was a tough go. But terrific show today, Dave. Not underdrive, as some thought. I think it was still overdrive.
I'm not sure.
Tomorrow, who knows?
Sure.
Tomorrow, who knows?
Let's
We'll
let
be back
the viewers
tomorrow
be
as
the
well.
judge of that.
Right.
But
thanks to Dukes. Thanks to JP. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We'll be back tomorrow afternoon at 4 p.m. We'll see you then.